Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the Next Bite event and of the Net Zero Food System event track. I'm Tommaso Emiliani. I work as a program manager at Yeti Food, and I'm delighted to be once again with you to explore together how we can transform the EU food systems in order to build better food systems for tomorrow. Before we start with the content of the day, we have a really interesting agenda for the panels on this stage. Let's start with a couple of technical details, especially for those who were not there here yesterday. Please make sure that you use this headset, as this is going to be a silent system. You have a small wheel in order to increase or decrease the volume in case that bothers you. Thank you, sir. Then, if you would like to share your experience here at Next Byte on social media, please do so by using the hashtag NextByte24. And then finally, since this event is all about communication, please remember to use the app Hybrido in order to schedule as many networking meetings as you wish in the dedicated area there. Now, back to the stage and back to the topic of this. This doesn't work. Yes, on red. Yes. Yesterday on this stage, we spoke about the dilemmas related to navigate change, an inevitable part of the journey towards a net zero food system objective. Today, we will build on those ideas by looking at how we can collaborate more effectively to ensure we drive meaningful action. The challenges we face, from the environmental impacts of conventional practices in agriculture to the complexities of consumer trust, are indeed enormous. But at the same time, these challenges offer us an opportunity for regeneration. Here in the Yeti Food community, in this community, we believe that we can regenerate the system through innovation. Just to be sure, this is not just about the technologies or solutions that we develop, but also about the ways we can come together to tackle the most urgent challenges we face. In other words, it's not enough to create new technologies or ideas. We need to ensure that they are embraced, integrated, and scaled to make a real difference. At a time when geopolitical tensions threaten global cooperation, our ability to work in partnerships has never been more critical. Transformative change in the food system can't happen in isolation. We need to make sure that collaboration happens between people, disciplines, and borders. Together, we can mobilize the power of social innovation and cutting-edge technology to build resilience in our ensuring it becomes sustainable, fair, and also adaptable. Today, as we know, it's World Food Day. It is therefore even more important that we reflect on the significance of what are we doing here. We're not just talking about change, we're building it. By fostering partnerships, exchanging knowledge, and sparking innovation, we can drive real progress towards a future where food systems restore the land, nourish communities, and regenerate the planet. This is our chance to transform how we produce, consume, and also think about food. And in doing so, we can inspire others to join us in this mission. Whether we're focusing on regenerative practices, rethinking protein sources, or mobilizing finance to support these efforts, our shared commitment to positive change will be the catalyst for a better tomorrow. So as we embark in another exciting day, let's remember the power we hold when we work together. Let's embrace the possibility of regeneration in the way we connect, we collaborate, and create a sustainable future for all. And with that, without any further ado, let's move towards the beef of our event track with the first panel of the day, which is entitled Unwrapped: Consumer Perceptions on Regenerative Agriculture. Regenerative agriculture can offer immense benefits for the planet, but how do consumers view this practice? Where are the research gaps in understanding consumer perceptions? We'll discuss insights and findings from the Citizens Participation Forum of the EAT Food Consumer Observatories. And for that, we have two very distinguished speakers. Our Eva Hochstins, Research on Consumer Insights at the Future of Food Institute and at the EAT Food Consumer Observatory, and Alicia Torres, Head of Grants at Juntos Farm. Thank you very much and enjoy the discussion.
Great. Thank you very much, Tommaso, for the warm introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm very excited to kind of host this conversation between, well, myself and Alicia. Today, we're going to focus on, well, as Tommaso said, consumer perceptions of regenerative agriculture. And I'm going to be presenting some of our research findings from the EIT Food Consumer Observatory, a recent project of EIT Food, which is kind of the consumer insights hub. And Alicia is going to, well, illustrate some of our findings with practices from Juntos Farm, which is a regenerative project and regenerative movement and farm on the island of Ibiza. But to begin, I would like to introduce you a bit more to the Consumer Observatory.
They are the driving force behind food trends and have a unique power to influence the way we produce, manufacture, package and regulate our food. But how much do we really know about what consumers buy and why? Powered by EIT Food and made up of a consortium of experts, the Consumer Observatory is dedicated to uncovering consumer attitudes and opinions on agri-food topics. By producing bespoke consumer insights, collating knowledge and analyzing consumer food trends, the Consumer Observatory is on a mission to put consumers at the heart of all food systems decision-making. Do you want to stay ahead of the curve?
And I shouldn't forget to mention that two of my colleagues from the Consumer Observatory will also be presenting in this time slot. Dirk will be on the main stage. They have not started yet. And Klaus will be on the stage next to us. So it feels like a bit of a Consumer Observatory takeover. So please enjoy. And next, I would like to present Juntos Farm.
My name is Christian Joknik, I'm the founder of Juntos. Usually refer to this as a living lab, and really it's a journey to find a better harmony with nature. There is a lot of great initiatives here on Ibiza, and Juntos is one part of an ecosystem. We hope to be able to create a place where you can see everything in one place, where you can see something being planted, something being harvested, something being transformed, something being experienced at the same place, and hopefully by seeing that, reminding ourselves that, this is the ecosystem that we are part of. For me, Juntos is about understanding, how does what we do affect others, and how can we make sure that what we do is in alignment with, the needs of everything around us. This sense of belongingness is a huge challenge today. I think by working together, by creating together, by supporting each other, we can start feeling that sense of belonging again.
I think it's wonderful to get such a visual image already of the project. But to kind of kick off our conversation, I would like to hear from you, Alicia. What does regeneration, or what does the regenerative movement mean for Juntos? How does it manifest itself?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank you for having us here today. It's an honor. Juntos is a regenerative farm that is on the island of Ibiza, as you've just seen. an island that has lost over 56% of its farming land over the last 20 years due to tourism. So what Juntos Farm is doing is transforming an abandoned cow farm into what we want it to be, the future of local produced regenerative food on the island of Ibiza. For us, regenerative is not only about agriculture, it's also about everything we do. It's a holistic approach that we encounter. So for us, regenerative is part of how are we transforming our buildings, how we produce our food, how we grow it, and also how we manage water, waste, and energy. And also for us, another important part of it is how we welcome community into our space. So for us, that is a regenerative movement.
Yeah, that's yeah. It's great to hear a bit more about the philosophy behind the farm. Kind of going back to the specifics of food and agriculture, can you tell us maybe a bit more about specific agricultural practices that are kind of typical for your farm and that differentiate you from conventional farms?
Yeah, that we practiced regenerative agriculture in 5 different key manners. So there's cover cropping, no tilling, animal livestock, also recycling organic matter and waste, and finally agroforestry and perennial trees that we intercrop between our fruit and veg that we farm.
Excellent.
Yeah, we farm over 70 hectares in different spaces, and we have goats, also hens and bees to integrate and improve biodiversity on the farm.
Yeah, that's very nice to hear. Well, so this session, of course, is about consumers and consumer understanding and perceptions of regenerative farming. But I guess a crucial question is, okay, why is it important to involve consumers? Why does this matter? And this is obviously something that we've been thinking about with the Consumer Observatory. And the main, our conclusion is that if we want to make regenerative farming and the regenerative movement a success, we need consumer demand, right? So for farmers to take the risk to transition, but also for retailers and even caterers to choose regenerative products, there needs to be a sort of proven demand that consumers are interested in this and will choose these products over products of conventional agriculture. So consumers need to prefer these products. They need to understand why they're better, what the benefits are. So we need to make sure that we gather enough consumer insights to really understand what would motivate consumers to choose regenerative products. So from the video, the introductory video, we already saw that, well, there weren't just farmers on the field. No. We saw plenty of other people that didn't look at least like farmers. Can you tell us a bit about that? Why, like, clearly you do involve consumers, and why is this? Why do you do this?
Well, for us, it's essential to involve consumers as part of of everything that we do, and for us, everyday consumers feel that they need to more, they demand more, and they are more informed each day. So for us, it's crucial to give them that information, and we are completely transparent. There are no gates on our farm, so everybody is welcome to come and walk around and see what's happening. We feel that we have the obligation to explain why the regenerative agriculture and the regenerative movement is so important. Why is it important for our ecosystem? Why is it important for the environment? And why is it important for all the families that all the people, no, basically. So we invite people to come to the farm every week, and we do so by organizing different activities, different experiences where they can experience what a regenerative food system looks like, basically.
Yeah, I see. Another important question is, of course, what do consumers already know about agriculture? Is agriculture something that is on their minds? Do they consider this when they go shopping for food? And in our study, we found that generally consumers have a pretty romantic idea of agriculture. And I'm not talking about regenerative or organic, I'm talking about agriculture in general. So this is a quote from one of the participants in our study, Poul from Denmark. He says, "When I think of agriculture, I think of the idyllic fields with corn waving in the wind, the rural landscape." So consumers have pretty positive associations with agriculture, and they see it as something that is connected to nature rather than working against nature. But at the same time, we also know that an agricultural method is not a driving force between consumer food choices, right? So for consumers, taste, price, nutrition are key. But when they're in the supermarket, they don't. For most people, the type of agriculture that was used to grow their food is not a major consideration. However, when we ask them to think a bit more critically about agriculture, we notice that one key theme that comes up is this fear and concern about chemicals, right? So this is a bit of a buzzword, but consumers are concerned about the effect of artificial fertilizers and pesticides on the healthiness of these products. And this is something where we think, regenerative can definitely have kind of a leg up from conventional agriculture in consumer perception. However, I think something that was really key in this study was to see that consumers don't really see a problem with conventional agriculture. So at the moment, regenerative agriculture is not solving a problem as far as they know. So there is this gap that we need to make sure that we cover with education. Consumers need to understand that there is something problematic with conventional agriculture that needs to be transformed. So how do you see this on Juntos and with the visitors you get or the consumers that interact with your farm? What do they know?
Yeah, I agree with you, Eva, that people don't know much about agriculture and even less about regenerative agriculture. I was telling you yesterday when we were preparing this session that the regenerative movement nowadays represents only 3% of the population. So in order for it to being heard and being understood a bit more, we need to increase those numbers. So what we do is, as I said before, invite people to come to the farm. So what we do know is how people feel when they connect to nature, when they put their hands in the soil. So at Juntos we have a volunteering program that happens every week, every Thursday. We invite anybody that wants to come to be a volunteer to help our farmers and to understand the work that they're doing. Maybe they don't know much about agriculture or they've never put their hands in the soil. But when they are there, we are able to explain to them the practices that we do and how we do it and be able to tell our story so that it's at that moment that we have the opportunity to explain what regenerative practice looks like and what a regenerative food system is. So we have people that this has been going on for maybe 3 months. And every week it's full. It's fully booked. So we have like 15 people coming every week to the farm, to the volunteering program.
Yeah, that's incredible. So there is clearly interest in not only consuming products of regenerative agriculture, but really being part of this movement.
Yeah,
actively.
and also they're really happy because they're free labor. Well, they help the farmers. But when they go home, they take a box of veg so that they see that what they've been doing has also a prize and is something that they feel proud of.
Yeah. That sounds amazing. I really want to. Mm-hmm. Another thing that we kind of noticed in our study is that there's a bit of confusion between what is regenerative agriculture and how it differs from organic agriculture. Is this something that comes up at all on your farm? Do people show up and say, "Oh, this is an organic farm"? And
well, we are an organic farm also. We are certified organic, but we take it a step further, no, with our practices that I mentioned before. We want them to see for themselves what it looks like. So the only thing is that there's not a clear definition on the word regenerative, so that's why maybe it's misunderstood. But when they see, maybe it's not necessary to give it such a clear clear definition. It's basically on the practices that you do, and that's what they see when they come to the farm.
Yeah. So they really see the proof of how it differs.
The proof of concept.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, so I mean, we see that at the moment consumers don't, on the one hand, don't really understand regenerative agriculture. They also don't really see a problem with conventional agriculture. So if we want to kind of promote this concept, we need to try and understand what kind of messaging we need to use to consumers to really grab their attention. I mean, we're going to see in a bit the kind of messaging you use also through social media and how that really resonates with people. But what we saw in the Citizen Participation Forum, where we conducted this research, is that generally people, once we've explained the concept of regenerative agriculture somewhat, and especially the healthiness of the soil, consumers tend to associate this with healthier and more tasty produce. So for them, there is a link, for most people, there is a link between a soil that has more nutrition and that actually ends up in our food. And this would be a very interesting hook, we think, for regenerative agriculture. If regenerative agriculture can really show to consumers that the produce is tastier and it's healthier, these kind of intrinsic motivations and intrinsic benefits can be a much stronger driver than simply environmental benefits or even animal welfare benefits, because consumers do find those important, but we see that they are not a major driver for food choice. But taste and nutrition can be and really are. So I was wondering a bit about this, on how does it work on Juntos? I mean, do you do any taste tests, or do you even check the nutrition of the food you produce? Does that differ from conventional? Is this something that we can prove to consumers?
Well, as I've said before, we invite people to come to the farm all the time. There's people coming in. No? So what we really want them to do is to experience by themselves the taste of our produce. And always our message is positive. It's always about experiencing, and it's always a positive message. So when they come to the farm, they feel this sense of proximity with what a farm looks like. And that is a way to also engage them and message them. Sorry. So it gives us the opportunity to bridge this gap that there is between the agriculture and food, because they feel for themselves and they taste for themselves. We have a tasting room that we recently opened where we cook food that we have just picked from the farm. So that also gives the sense of freshness. And we've introduced a concept that we call Minute Zero, because it's not only local, that everybody knows what local is, but a minute zero, that the food you're going to be eating has been picked that very morning. So that is something that people like to try and experience.
Yeah, there is a lot of appeal on freshness,
Yeah.
right, and high quality produce that is associated with something just being
picked
from
Yeah.
the farm. And what about testing for nutrition?
Yeah, well, we're as I said, well, we're a new farm. We've been in this site for under 2 years now. And what we have been testing are the nutritional values of the milk from our goats, and also the honey from the beehives. And it has tested that, for example, the bees, it's pure raw honey with no kind of cross-contamination whatsoever. So it's 100% pure. And also the milk is of really, really high quality, because we let the goats out into the forest every morning to eat what there is, and the different bushes and stuff, and also into the fields to eat up, well, maybe what's been going off and what the farmers haven't been able to pick. No, I want to give an example. A couple of weeks ago, 2 girls came to the farm and they said, "Wow, we want to try your tomatoes, because we've heard they're the best tomatoes on the island of Ibiza, and for us, that makes us proud."
Yeah, I mean that you can't get better advertisement than that. That
No.
other people will tell
For the taste.
how you have the tastiest produce. Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier even that the testing of the milk, that you do this in collaboration with the university, and yeah, so it's great to really to show the added benefit of producing food like this versus in a conventional way?
Yeah, for us, as I said, we're a new farm and we've just started with measurements. But measuring impact is going to be and is an essential part of our values and of our mission.
Yeah. So this is something we've touched upon quite a bit already, but I would love to know if there's anything else that you would like to add about how. So we've talked about the why. Why is it important to involve consumers? But besides just selling them the produce, tell us more about how you engage them. And I would like to show and really point out, I only noticed the other day that you have an incredible amount of followers on Instagram.
Yeah, we think that we believe in the power of visual storytelling and put a lot of effort into that. And it is a way also to engage in that community that is not close to us. We are on an island that, yes, has over 4 million visitors a year and has a name to it. So maybe that is also a good way to engage consumers indirectly, that they come across this beautiful regenerative farm. But I would like to point out that our best community engagement that happens, thanks to an EIT grant that we were given last year, a proof of concept public engagement grant, we organize what we call a day at the farm. So this day at the farm has been going on since then and is an event that happens once a week, where we invite the community to come to the farm and experience for themselves what a regenerative food system looks like. And we organize different activities for the whole family, for children, families, adults. So what we have is we invite people to give talks, people that are relevant in this regenerative movement, not only talking about agriculture, but talking about other topics so that everybody feels that it resonates with them, and also with food and music. So as a data, in this last summer, we've had over 7,000 people coming to our Day at the Farm event, and it is something that we are doing regularly every week.
Yeah.
Eva, this is very fascinating. So why don't we open up the floor for one or two questions in case we have any, because we have a couple of minutes.
I think that's a
before
great
we wrap
idea.
up.
I'm just going to quickly move on to our last slide, because I do want to mention that if you're interested in learning more about this report from the Consumer Observatory, you can scan this code or just go to our website and download it. We also have some little mini guidebooks here today. Some are on the chairs here, but our communications team is everywhere today and we'll be handing these out. And of course, well, if you can follow, but also visit Juntos Farm.
Yeah, there are lots of projects like ours around the world. So we do invite you to visit us, or if you come to Ibiza, please come and visit. But all over the world, wherever you go, find a project that has this kind of experience, because you will really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, and see it for yourself.
Exactly.
Great. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Thank you for sharing your story. It's quite inspiring, and thank you for the information regarding consumer research. It was really helpful to understand all of this. I have a question regarding kind of maybe an advantage that you have, the location. And do you think that really helps drive the consumer demand and then the opportunities to engage with people that go visit at the farm? And would you have any other recommendations for locations that might not have as an attractive of a consumer base that's visiting such a beautiful island?
Yeah, I know we are in an advantaged place because it's a tourist destination. But I have to say that 50% of the people that come to our events are locals. They're not only tourists that come to visit, because Ibiza is an island that is a tourist island, but it has the tourist demand more in the summer season. But also in the winter season this happens, so the people that come are local visitors. So what we found out doing this event last year was that local people have an appetite to this kind of activities because they come with the family and it's something completely different to do. So it's just testing really is what people in each area would like to experience and put it into practice. It's a trial error thing that we've done, and we've found what is most interesting for the people that come or that live on the island of Ibiza.
I'm afraid we need to wrap up because we're already biting into the next session. Today we have a very packed agenda in the morning, but this was extremely insightful. And the fact that we could only take one question actually makes me, give an opportunity to remind you that you can indeed connect with Alicia, with Eva, and with the other members of the EAT Food Consumer Observatory through Hybrido, our networking app that will be available during the day. So thank you very much, both of
Thank
you.
you.
I think that was very insightful and nice to hear about the regenerative movement, indeed. So, thank you very much for your collaboration. Now we move towards the next panel discussion. The previous one only had 2 speakers, although they were full of energy and enthusiasm. The next one is a more, let's say, populated panel discussion on the topic of sowing sustainability, unveiling regenerative agriculture's impact on soil function and health. So we continue to discuss regenerative agriculture, indeed from a slightly different perspective. The role of regenerative agriculture in advancing a net zero food system is often discussed in general terms. This session will focus on innovative methods and metrics to evaluate the impact of regenerative agricultural practices. We'll discuss how regenerative agriculture can transform farming by boosting resilience, enhancing biodiversity, and reducing reliance on chemical inputs. And in order to do so, I'd like to welcome on stage Gonzalo Amorin, who's going to be the who's going to be the moderator. Welcome, Gonzalo, founder and CEO at Building Global Innovators in Portugal. And I'll let you manage the invitation of all the other speakers who are standing in the backstage. So thank you very much, Gonzalo. See you later.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here today. Yes, we have a busy session with some fantastic speakers to share what's going on, what's the state of the art in the world around the regeneration of our soils. So I'm the founder and CEO of BGI. I will be moderating this session. It's a busy session, so I will not spend too much time. Tommaso has done a fantastic introduction of the topic. I'd like to ask to come on stage Stefan and Margarida. Please have a seat. Stefan will start Van Willet is a nutrition scientist with metabolomics expertise, and he's a Dutch citizen. Also been in Wageningen University, but now it's a fellow at University of Ohio, Utah. And Margarida is a scientific director, technology and scientific director at Food for Sustainability, a not-for-profit collaborative organization focused in sustainable food production systems without the use of chemical synthetic pesticides. Margarida will present the state of the art of Tech for Regena project, where we've been collecting baseline samples, microbiology samples, and physical-chemical characteristics of close to 200 farms across Europe. And she'll be drawing some of the early insights of what the findings were. So without further ado, Stefan, please come on stage. We'll load your presentation, and then on food nutrition, then we'll have a panel, and I'll ask the other speakers to please join us. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I speak relatively loud, but you'll still be able to better hear me when I talk into a microphone, especially when you have headsets on. So my name is Dr. Stefan van Vliet. I'm a professor at Utah State University, and a lot of our work is focused on the link between agroecology and the nutrient density of our food. So do more sustainable production system, also improve the quality of our food. So I'll set the stage on that today. So I want to look at the definition of agroecology, and really, I think what we should be focused on is viewing nature and agriculture not as separate systems. We often look at urbanization, nature, farming as three separate systems. But when we can integrate these and view these as one separate or one entire entity, I think this is an important shift. And I want to look at a paper that we wrote a few years ago, and one of the quotes that we had in the paper is nature has introduced great biodiversity into ecosystems, yet humans typically simplify these systems to single species of crops and animals in separate production systems. And as a result, for these production systems to be productive require considerable external inputs. Now, perhaps that made a lot of sense after the Green Revolution, and we still arguably have to continue to do so, but finding a balance in that, looking more at agroecosystems that can be productive by having an integration of crop livestock systems, silvopastoralism, wildlife integration, I think is a key part. Because if you look at natural ecosystems, there's not typically one plant or animal species, but there's a variety of them that act in a coherent way. This is from the FAO, and typically simplified systems are productive initially, but over the long run, they can limit productivity. Important to improve efficiency and use of resources, conserving, protecting, and enhancing natural ecosystems. But we also have to take into account the resilience of people and the communities and ecosystems, and promoting good governance of both natural and human ecosystems. So what does this mean in a practical setting? Well, this is from some nice work that looked at, for instance, a cropping system and crop fertilization, often requiring external inputs. But in this case, and there's a lot of farmers that we work with that are integrating these systems, is that if you look further down, an integrated crop livestock system, in this case with lamb that graze the fields, and that's in the same time there's also soybean production. What you can see there is that the animal is actually able to fertilize the lands, thus decreasing your inputs. You're producing two types of foods on the same land, so you're increasing the productivity of the land. And also with any unharvested residue of the soybean crop, the animal can graze that and gives you another opportunity to upcycle any byproduct. So these are examples of by which you can improve the system fertilization as well as the nutrient density. So this is an example of what we talked about in several papers, but thinking about it as nutrient cycles in regenerative farming systems, where typically we see the opportunity to decrease the input of fertilizers and pesticides, reducing tillage. It could be something as a multi-animal species with cattle and integration of chickens that then capitalize on the manure by eating some of the dung beetles and the larvae as an additional feed source, putting nutrients back into the soil, and then at the same time we're fertilizing the system through the animal by depositing manure and urine. In this case, in an integrated system, we see that what we're typically seeing is that also the nutrient density as a result can be increased when we use such integrated systems. And of course, how this looks in your particular farm, we have to make these local adaptations. It's not that everyone can per se integrate multiple species or multiple plants, but having some sort of integration of plant biodiversity or animal integrations where possible is typically a good thing. And how that looks is tailored to the local ecosystem, and that is really the importance to the farmer and the local community, what that looks like. I also, within our lab, we have a big interest in considering foods as more than proteins and fats. Unfortunately, we have dumbed down foods to protein and fat. Meat is protein, soybean is protein, yogurt is protein, but foods, the food metabolome probably contains 40,000 unique metabolites that can impact, that interact with our cells, that interact with our metabolism, that have nutritive value to us, that can turn on and turn off genes related to disease expression. So we really should look at food more than just protein and fats, and really consider the broader array of food, how this impacts with us, and then the nutrigenome, which is nutrition-related gene expression. So I think it's really important that we consider a holistic approach to food as well. So based on the concepts, do healthy soils equal healthy plants and equal healthy animals? And can we, when we improve soil health, do we see this trickle-down effects towards plants, towards animals, and towards human health, either through direct consumption of the plant, or in this case, what I'll present on a case study is where we looked at does increasing plant diversity in grazing systems impact animal health and nutrient density, which I certainly believe are the same thing, right? It's a distinction without a difference. How does that impact human health down the line? To set the stage for this, my grandmother always told me, Stefan, you are what you eat. And it turned out from this type of work, she was about half right. So about 50% what circulates in our blood is directly related to the foods that we eat, more than anything else. So the human metabolome basically is a fancy way of saying the metabolites that circulate in our blood. This could be vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and other products that circulate in our food. So think about it. The main way we interact with our environment is by the foods that we eat. So about 50% of what circulates in our body is related to the foods that we eat. Doesn't mean that if you eat hamburgers, you turn into a hamburger, or you eat broccoli, you turn into a broccoli, but it is the main determinant of what circulates in our body. And is this true for a cow too? Arguably, yes. Just another mammal, right? So we did on-farm sample collection in this particular study, collecting soil samples from a monocrop field used for livestock feed. I realize this is more in the context of a system in the US where we're really heavily focused on feed, but even growing corn here to feed to animals is quite common in Europe as well. And then we looked at, well, what if you put the animals on a biodiverse pasture? And we collected these samples only 2 kilometers apart. So soil samples were collected. We collected forage and feed samples as well. The feed sample being total mixed rations, corn and hay, feed to animals in confinement, or animals or the pasture samples. The meat also then collected, ground up into a fine powder that we can use for analytical analysis of the nutrient density. Now, what we found in this particular work is that about 30% of the metabolites that was in the meat were different depending on the feeding of the animal. So this means that what you feed the animal is being reflected, much like we would see in a human, for instance. Why is that the case? Well, if we look at forage samples and if we look at phytochemicals, which are plant-derived metabolites, this could be particular polyphenols or phenolics or flavonoids, compounds that typically have antioxidant, antimicrobial activity. We see that this is much higher in the forage samples compared to the total mixed ration samples. With corn, the corn part, the grain part of that ration, providing almost none of these compounds. So while a good source of protein, you're not getting this broad array of these thousands of nutrients that can interact with our cells and can have antioxidant, antimicrobial effects. Now, there won't be a quiz on these compounds, but here on the left, what you can see is that these are all plant-derived metabolites that are in the forage. And as you can see here, a lot of these are flavonoids, polyphenols, things that are in blueberries as well, but they're also in forages. And you can see that these are particularly high in the grass. And then if you look at it on the right, the animal takes these compounds from the forage and turns it into a bioavailable source of antioxidants that do not only improve the health of the animal, but can also potentially make the meat healthier for consumers. Essentially, you get these antioxidants in versions that are very similar to the antioxidants in our body, because a cow is just another mammal like us. So if we give a cow access to more plant diversity, you see that there's typically more antioxidants within the meat. So we see a transfer from plant to animal. How do we know that? Well, benzoic acid is a major phenolic. Hyporate is a major antioxidant. There's a direct relationship between the two. Then animal health and human nutrition. If you look at FAO reports or the International Agency on Cancer Research, meat, now many things have been labeled a potential carcinogen, almost anything, but meat has too. One of the reasons for that is the case is for compounds such as 4-HNE, which is a lipid peroxidation product. And we can actually see that by how you feed the animal or how you treat the animal, you can actually lower these levels already. So these are compounds that are maybe negative to us, but you can actually, it's just a reflection of the health of the animal. So animal health and human nutrition, we can clearly see these linkages. And glutathione, a major antioxidant in our body, also increased in the animal. And animal health and human nutrition, this is the last part that I will go over, but basically these phytochemicals that we study, these are also flavor compounds. This is also important. They give the aroma to your meat, they give the flavor to the meat. And this is a quote from an explorer in the 1800s in the US. Because we use modern science for this, but people wouldn't be people if they already know this. So this is from Warren Angus Ferris that said in the 1830s to 1835, they fed on bison, which is an important ruminant to the North American ecosystem. He said bison in poor flesh were the worst diet imaginable, but as the animal fed on a diverse mix of plants, no other meat could compare. It meant that they could, whether they boiled it, they don't need seasoning, and it was very relished. What he's talking about is that greater biodiversity, that flavor that he could taste, is the phytochemical richness of the meat and milk that gives the flavor to the cheeses, to the meat, right? Think about grazing sheep through the Sardinian mountains. That gives the deep flavor to the cheese. So we're seeing that too, which is anecdotally already known by humans for a long time. So relationship with soil health. We see that increases in soil health when the field is managed as a pasture as opposed to a crop field. So you see this improvement in soil health. We also see more life in the soil, ergothioneine, only produced by cyanobacteria in the soil. We see that this increases in the meat, another important antioxidant. And then finally, I want to give it over to Margarita to set the stage for the next part. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stefan. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to present here the results from and the insights from the EU farms, and also a brief introduction to Tech for Regenerative project that was already introduced yesterday by Viviane. So I will be very, very brief in presenting this project in which we are involved that just started. So this project, Tech for Regenerative, aims to transform the European agriculture with innovative, data-driven, regenerative practices for sustainable agriculture. So our mission is to empower the agricultural sector with tools and knowledge for the effective transition of regenerative agriculture. So this is us. So we are a consortium of industry and innovation partners like BGI and Certifier, and research and development partners where we stand with IATA CSIC, and also academia partners. Basically, I will go very briefly with the main action areas in which we are involved, which are policy review. I put here the pictures of the people involved in each of these action areas, and you will have the opportunity to meet all these people during the coffee breaks, because most of the people involved is here in this meeting. So. Besides policy review, we are also involved in the education and training activities. Thanks. So also pilot design and implementation, and this is one of the main action areas in which Food for Sustainability is involved, where we will engage with milk farmers, because we want to demonstrate with this project that regenerative farming practices have an impact in the nutritional content of milk. So this is really aligned with Stefan just presented. And we also want to engage with other farmers, not only milk producers, to demonstrate the impact of regenerative practices in soil health. So this is the people involved in pilot design and implementation. We also have one of the action areas as data-driven verification for RegenAg benefits. We want to integrate all the data. This is the big challenge of the project, I think, and validate this digital twin. And also to create business and relation with corporates, so map startups, scale-ups, identify the needs of startups and scale-ups to launch startup mentoring and support. This is an action area that is the responsibility of BGI, and also consumer awareness. So this is really aligned with consumer observatory results, and this will be led by Amparo Tarrega from CICIC. So our focus is soil regeneration. We want to understand microbial communities in the soil. We want to understand how to integrate all the data related to the microbial activities in the soil, the microbial functions that are active in the soil, and all the soil properties like physical and chemical properties, and integrate this with pedoclimatic characteristics as well. So this is the big challenge. And at Food for Sustainability, we are really focused on soil health. So we had the opportunity in collaboration with EIT Food Northeast and Biotrex, we took advantage of an ongoing project in which they were already collecting soil samples from 6 different countries across Europe, and we took advantage of this ongoing project and decided to also analyze soil microbial communities using next generation sequencing, because the project was using only microbial enzymatic activities. So we received samples that was kindly sent to us by Biotrex, by Rafał Igielski. We received 189 soil samples, soils that were that had different crops, so 29 different crops, and soil sample collection and soil processing was done by Biotrex. They did the microbial community analysis using enzymatic activities and soil microbiota functional analysis, and we thought it would be nice to know also to have also the functional analysis based on the microbial communities present in the soil. So we use DNA sequencing to unveil which microbes are in the soil, and based on this information we provide a functional analysis of each soil. So with the help of Rafał Igielski from Biotrex, so we selected 2 farms, 2 organic farms, to compare these farms in terms of the microbial functionality in the soil. And these farms are 2 very interesting results, because they are both organic, but according to the agronomists, the soil in both farms were very different. So we classified this farm 12 as the bad farm, the farm that had soil in poor conditions, and farm 6 the good farm, in which the soil was in very good conditions. So the main difference between these two farms was that in farm 12 there is they have been doing intensive tillage, so the structure of the soil has been really affected, and in opposition to farm 6 where tillage is reduced. So, and when we decided to compare these two farms was we had this demonstration that the practices that we do in the farms have a huge impact in microbial communities, not only at the level of enzymatic analysis, but also at the level of the microbial communities that are in the soil. So we had similar results using microbial enzymatic activities and the microbial communities that live in the soil using the DNA sequence technology. So we saw that microbial performance that describes soil microbial activity and biodiversity based on microbial activity was really low in farm 12 compared to farm 6. So using our approach, DNA sequencing, we found very interesting that in the farm that has the soil in poor conditions, we have a higher number of species, but in terms of functionality, the functionality is low. This means that the ecological functions that matter in the soil are lower in farm 12 compared to farm 6. So this is very interesting, and this means that sometimes we can have higher number of species, higher abundance of species, but we may not have the species that do the important job, that provide important functions to soil. So we also found differences at the level of the microbes that are involved in auxin production, cytokinin production, which are hormones that are important for cell proliferation. And we also had differences in the microbes that are present in the different farms regarding the microbes that produce exopolysaccharides, ACC deaminase, so the microbes that are involved in heavy metal resistance and also that produce abscisic acid that is also important for growth regulation and plant resistance. So these are important differences, and we can see that in the two farms just having this small difference in the tillage, so the kind of soil is, the type of soil is the same, but the practices that we have in the field have a huge impact in the microbial communities in the soil. So taking in consideration that farmers are really worried about the risk of disease and the pathogens that are in the soil, we also have in our analysis an index that indicates the risk of disease. And this is one example of a crop. This is wheat, a soil that is being cultivated with wheat, and we can provide the risk level of disease and based on the pathogen load in the soil. We took the top 3 cultures, crops that we analyzed, which is wheat, corn and sunflower, and we found that about 1/3 of the farms had high or very high risk of disease. This doesn't mean that the crops have the disease, it means that the pathogen load in the soil is higher in these crops. And we found several pathogens that can induce Fusarium wilt, Pythium rot, so these are mainly fungi pathogens, and oomycetes. And using our in-house soil microbe database, which is a science-based database that we built based on microbe soil plant interactions, we looked into the literature and saw that there are already some studies that tested some microbes against the microorganisms that cause these diseases. So this is important information and helpful information if you want to add microbes to the soil to help in the control of these diseases. So we also asked our agronomists for possible recommendations and regenerative management practices to control these diseases. And since all diseases are caused by fungi or oomycetes that spread by spores, it's the kind of recommendations are quite similar to all diseases. So it's avoiding soil mobilization, do minimum till or no till, direct seeding, crop rotation, select varieties that are more resistant to pathogens, use clean propagation material, disinfect tools and machinery, and whenever possible add ruminants to after cropping. So just a final remark on all these insights from the EU Farms and the Tech for Regenerative project. So these microbial analyses are very important to get the whole picture. So it's not only having the physical and chemical analysis, but the microbial communities in the soil and their activity are very important to provide tailored recommendations to farmers after identifying the needs in the soil. So also, soil is a very complex ecosystem, so it is the house for 25% of the biodiversity on Earth, so it's a complex ecosystem. So we need to collect as much data as possible, not only look to the microbial properties, but look to the pedoclimatic characteristics, look to physical and chemical characteristics of the soil. So the big challenge here is to integrate all this data, I think. So, and we need to know how to analyze all this data because it's a lot of data. So I think Tech for Regenag will bring new data and also digital tools to help in the analysis of this data and to provide knowledge to foster this transition to regenerative practices. So thank you all. This is the team involved in Tech for Regenag, and a big thank to Rafal and Hiroshi from Biotrax that help in the analysis of these samples and provided important data for this analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. That's a fascinating presentation in a very short amount of time. Please join us in stage. I want to ask Stefan, Margarita. Oh, not Margarita. You can have a seat. Alfred, please. Miguel, José. We will now start our panel. Please, I'll be sitting here. Gentlemen, have a seat. I'm so excited to moderate this panel with so many. Alfred, sorry, that's my seat over there. All right, but the challenge is that Tommaso is like concerned with time. We should have a couple of hours, and instead we have 25 minutes. So I will quickly introduce, well, Stefan, everyone knows now, Stefan and his work on meat nutrition density. Alfred comes all the way, thanks Alfred. And by the way, all the people that have traveled so far to be here with us to share their knowledge. Alfred comes from Austria, is a Wageningen lighthouse research farm, doing a lot of work with exciting, vibrant researchers trying to speed up the adoption, accelerating the adoption of regenerating our soils using vermicomposting. Alfred will be talking more about these technologies developed over 25 years on his own farm on 19 hectares. Then we have José Ruas. José is a kind of very interesting character because he's a philosopher turned agronomist and a farmer, and he's looking at old heritage cereals and how this can be more adapted to the climate change challenges, and of course seeing how we can regenerate our soils as well. And finally, Miguel, a young engineer studying in Évora University, one of the oldest universities in Portugal, agronomy science. and is a third generation of in the Azores archipelago of 120 hectare farm. His grandfather has been farming it with bovine milk and cows, which are a very happy species living in harmony with humans in extensive grazing, and is now learning how he can improve his grandfather's farm with his father. All right. So starting maybe with you, Alfred, tell us about your vermicomposting magic and what you've been how you've been working the soils and how you think vermicomposting can help in this process.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here. It's great to listen to your and Maria's presentation. It's really amazing what is done with research, what we can find out, and that's actually really what we do. So we have a research farm, a research and demonstration farm. I'm an arable field farmer. We have a market garden. We have agroforestry on the farm. And the reason why we work with scientists is because we started to work with earthworms first. Yeah? So I do not have any university degree. I have a very simple, I'm just a farmer, I have a very simple education. But I always say I'm trained by earthworms. That means that I learned with the work on the earthworms and together with the scientists, I learned to understand, just a little bit, but I'm still learn to understand soil-plant interaction. Now I learn about soil-animal interaction and how it transforms the soil, how it transforms the nutrient density, how it transforms even the human health. So this really shows how important regenerative agriculture is. And we just don't know too much of it. So we know very little because the research is really young. And I'm very much looking forward to get in depth with that research and work with all of you and also with other as a research farmer to bring regenerative agriculture on a much deeper level and scale it out.
Thank you, Alfred. And it's great to see that the work that you're doing is really proving that you can regenerate with the inoculation of the seeds and then they multiply themselves in the ground. We'll talk more about that in the little time we have. José, tell us what you're trying to achieve in Alentejo, where there's no water, and how you think these old genetic characteristics of these seeds can respond to climate change challenges.
Well, thank you for having me here. We were, I did a lot of different things before coming back to agriculture, where I grew up, and looking at nutrition and worried with human health. I needed to understand what's the basis, right? And our civilization, our culture is related to grain and related to bread. And we used to be able to produce really good grains, and we used to be able to eat bread without problems. And so I think the answer should be somewhere in the past too. And that's why I went looking for these heritage varieties of cereal and try to understand what's so good about them. And it's very interesting that these old varieties still maintain the capacity to interact and to enter in symbiosis with microorganisms. This will bring so many valuable benefits, not only for the soil and the regeneration of the soil, but also for the nutrition. So this is really our goal in where we are in Alentejo, is to produce the healthiest food for the healthiest grains for the people that consume them, and the healthiest also for the soil. There's a lot of other agronomical benefits from it, is that not only can they interact with microbiology, but also they will grow taller, and so we can use biodiversity.
This is with water irrigation or no water?
This is without irrigation.
Fantastic.
And they can interact with so there's a possibility to have other plants growing with them. So low growing plants on top of which the wheat will grow. And that's what we're trying to have, micro biodiversity in the plant so that we can have biodiversity in the soil.
Fantastic.
And to bring all these benefits, water infiltration and all this.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being here with us. And finally, but not least, Miguel, tell us about a bit your farm and how cultural aspects from your grandfather, your father, and you, what you see is the opportunity for your farm and for you as a young farmer getting into this complex structure.
For starters, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here. My grandfather started to, I think he did around 20 hectares of corn, only relying on men and animal power. And then he used to store all the corn in a vertical silo. And then my father and my grandfather have had access of bigger machinery, but unfortunately that give us another roll of problems that we need to solve in my generation. My father, my great grandfather had around 500 cows, all milking by hand, and I think he had more than 100 people working for him in that time. So a lot of change from what we see now, and then in my generation we need to improve even more.
Thank you, Miguel. And coming back before I turn over to the audience, and as you see, it's great to have you guys all here because I think among you guys, you have the solutions for many of the problems that we are facing and humanity is facing now with our impoverished soils. Stefan, how do you think this, you mentioned in your presentation, animal well-being, health, in the case of bovine, and the importance of this biodiversity in their crops. So there was a phrase that you used, we are what we eat and cows are what they eat. What's the importance of these, let's say, biodiversity in crops, cover crops, and what recommendation in the phytochemicals density, which are super important for their health, with all the antimicrobial antioxidant properties, what recommendations would you give, for instance, Miguel in his farm? How can he improve these phytochemical characteristics in the meat?
Yeah, one thing that we find is that biodiversity is probably one of the strongest predictors, and I would say to Miguel is that the plants that grow well in your ecosystem, that should be the determinant. That's the main thing. And if farmers ask me, well, do I need this plant or that plant? Well, it's the plant that grows well in that ecosystem. So tailored local adaptations, they are very key. And picture it like that. Let's say we put half the room, and for lunch today, I'm going to give you your plate, and you only get 1 or 2 foods. And then the other half of the room can go to a buffet, and you can select from 50 different foods. And we do that for multiple months. Then this half of the room will probably be healthier or better nourished than that half of the room. A cow is just the same. It's just another mammal. So I really think we ought to see.
Maybe we started experience today.
We could, yeah. Well, we do on human nutrition trials, right? So I think this biodiversity part is very key. Yep.
Thank you, Stefan. Well, we only have about 2 minutes left. Otherwise, Tommaso will shoot me on stage a bit more. All right. So we'll do a kind of a quick question rounds. If there's any questions for these experts in the room. If not, we'll carry on. But I'm sure there's a couple of questions. Microphone, please. Yes, there's a mic coming. Don't be shy. Let's use the opportunity to digest as much as possible. Yes.
Hello.
Sorry, you're next.
My name is Sosio Chierego. I do apologize because I can check the quantity and the quality of professionalism here. Most of you are scientists, agronomists. I come from the business side. And in terms of that, to turn this into business, into reality, in the end we need to understand the reason why. I mean, what's the conversion? And I'm very curious, apart of the very interesting KPIs you've given, which honestly I'm a bit struggling, how much this transfer in terms of reactivity of crops, performance, I don't know, less waste, better competitiveness of market. I mean, by the way, a lot of you are from Portugal, which is I'm Italian, but I love Portugal, and falo português também.
Ah, muito bem.
I really would invite you to share with us and in general to give a metrics to convince with a strong narrative basically to put this into action, and also last but not the least the customer, how you can convince all this will be advantage for big retailers in Europe. I know I don't want to sound too trivial,
No,
but
no,
in
it's
the end it's
important.
about money.
Yeah, of course.
And farm to fork it's there,
Yeah.
and showing how much ideology
Yeah.
without business and social consequence has a provoked the monster. Sorry to be direct.
No. That's a great question. Before I turn over to the panel, I'll just share our experience working with the largest retail chains in Portugal. We work with the top 3. They represent perhaps 60-70% of the market. And what we are finding is that we can reduce the farm input costs per hectare from 5,000 euro per hectare on average to maybe a tenth of that. So we are working on it. So keep posted. Any other comments? I mean, Stefan, we were talking about market size this morning, and in the US, of course, very different from Europe. But we know that you can command a higher price in food nutrition. You want to share
Yeah,
your
from at
experience
least
there?
the American perspective, and maybe it's a possibility here, is that people are willing to pay a premium. So if you have animals that are raised on a biodiverse pasture that are grass finished, people that see the health benefit in that are willing to pay a premium for that, and the farmer can get a livable wage. This might be, for instance, double is what people pay for them. So that's how the business side of things work. I think it will be consumer education and getting that to people, I think is key. But from what we typically see is this is really a grassroots movement where people maybe sell that meat online. I know it's maybe not that common here, but it is really the direct-to-consumer part that really started to grow this out of. And what we see is that our large retailers are now paying attention to that because they're like, okay, regenerative agriculture is coming up. Maybe if we have foods that are regenerative organic certified, that have front-of-label packaging about nutrient density, this meat has more omega-3s, this meat has more phytochemicals, that you can get a higher price for that. The farmer gets rewarded, and then hopefully at some point that becomes the norm.
Thank you, Stefan. Alfred, I know you've been using this inoculation technique. Tell us about how this gentleman in the room can use it for multiplication of his bacteria and microbiome, soil microbiome, using just the seeds and not just using the whole overall, let's say, treatment of the per hectare or per 1,000 hectares, but localized where it's needed.
Okay.
So input reduction.
Yeah. So what we do is input reduction. For example, in case we can coat the seed with the microbiome, with the community of microbes from the earthworm. So the earthworm, every children knows earthworm is beneficial for the soil. It's good. It's like the bee in the soil, and the microbiome. So the microbes that the earthworm produces or gets out of it, then you can use it. And so you can reduce your cost. But on the other side, back to the questions, so I would not necessarily agree with everything that you asked, because I wouldn't say at the end it's the money. I think the money is part of the game, but at the end it's the life. So what is really important. But also money is important. So answering your question from my side is we also have to think about the true costs. So on one side, if we try to make cheap food, and produce commodities, and at the same time degrade the soil, contaminate the environment, the water, the soil, the air, then it's not good. And so we have to shift our values and have to think about the true costs, because in such a system that you're claiming, we regenerate the soil while we produce high quality food. So this is something we really have to think of. And this could be part for your answer. Thank you.
I know the Commission is also working on ecosystem services. So this job that Alfred is talking about, how can the Commission remunerate in the new CAP, new Common Agriculture Policy? It's a big complex discussion, very much varied across different countries in Europe. We know what our challenges are in Mediterranean countries because we are suffering it much more than, let's say, northern countries. These guys have meters of topsoil, organic soils. We have centimeters of topsoils, so it's not the same across Europe, and it's something we need to start discussing. But now it's time to do it. Any other comments to address this question? No. Otherwise, we pass on to the next question. All right, there was a gentleman there in the blue shirt, had a question, and then maybe final comments. Yes, Stefan. There's two questions in the room. The blue shirt first. Yes, and then Stefan, sorry, you're next.
No, I can pass it on to Stefan quite quickly.
I'm afraid we'll only have time for one question.
One question, okay. So Stefan, go for it, or you go for it, or
yeah,
you both go for it, I don't know.
All right, very briefly then, to add on to this question, because first of all, thanks everyone for this amazing work. But we're trying to do some things on the consumer side, convincing them when we talk about, we can talk about taste, of course, but we talk about nutrition, we talk about health, and then I find out it's very difficult to go beyond storytelling. Now, storytelling, what can we actually safely say already that is better, basically, right? So if we talk, for example, at food as medicine, it's a very risky field we get into. What can we safely say already? How close are we of really making bold statements there?
Okay, quick comments. How can these translate to better microbiome, your gut microbiome, Stefan? Maybe quick comments from all of you guys.
Yeah, on paper the food looks more nutritious. I think that's what we can say. And then we have to do a series of human nutrition trials whether it will translate to an actual health benefit. But on paper, I think we can say the food looks more nutrient dense.
There are studies in the US that say, so we grow vegetable in a market garden, small scale, high quality, hopefully. And there are studies in the US that say the food that is produced there could be paid by the government and goes for free to the consumers, and the government would still save money on the health service. So just in mind, food is a medicine.
Integrating everything into the system, not just food, but also health. Jose.
I'd like just to add that Bionutrient Institute, with which Stefan works with, they're doing a great job, and they'll be able soon, hopefully, to measure on spot the nutrition of some food. And when you understand that you'll have the same nutrition in one loaf of bread instead of the other 2 or 3, then you'll understand that paying that premium is actually cheaper for you, and you'll understand that you're actually getting more nutrition. So we're dependent on technology to make quick analysis and to empower the consumer, which will empower the farmer and the producer. That's it.
Miguel, one other? No, you're happy? Okay, so I'll add one quick comment. One Health. We need to do more research on One Health. Our second brain is our stomachs, our gut, and that's the solution for many diseases. Stefan, very quickly, otherwise I think Thomas will kill me, but go
that's
for it.
okay. No, thanks very much, Gonzalo. Just a quick question, and it started from what Stefan said, and I just about the importance of varieties in particular, and what we still see in Europe is huge fields that contain just one species. So multi-species sword is also was not mentioned actually in some of the slides. So I just wanted some discussions around really why not and what can we do more of really, because we know that's going to be the future for really increasing the level of organic matter and quality of the soil.
Yeah, so your question is about multi-species within animal systems. Yeah, I didn't go too deep into it because I didn't want to take up too much time. But what we're finding is that biodiversity, plant diversity, is the best predictor for the nutrient density and the health of the animal. So in the US we have the same problem, lots of monocultures, whether it be in cropping systems or in animal species. But if we're able to increase plant diversity, making again the local adaptation, the plants that grow well in Portugal might not grow well here in Italy.
You mentioned also animal biodiversity, goats, and these experiments you're
yes,
conducting.
Because you can produce more food on an acre, and this is also and this is where it gets really nuanced, because we always have this idea: well, can we produce enough meat to feed the population? And then we have models that only look at single species of animals, but if you integrate sheep and cows together, you can produce more food per pound an acre, and you also get soil health benefits. So I think these are very important things that are hard to model, but we really have to take into account those aspects, embrace that complexity. We don't fully understand it, but that's okay.
we have to move towards that way. Well, I want you to thank all the panelists, those that traveled far to be with us a few minutes. We could make this whole day, Tommaso. Next year you have to give us more time. Sorry about that, but we'll be here again. And thanks to everyone for attending. And grab these guys if you're interested. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you very much to all of you for these insights. 2 presentations and 5 speakers on stage in 40 minutes. This was a titanic endeavor. Some might say as titanic as scaling regenerative agriculture from the local context to the across all Europe. Right now, please don't leave your seat because we're moving into the next panel discussion. Someone has mentioned in the previous discussion that Farm to Fork has actually created monsters. So in fact, this gives us the opportunity to produce a nice transition towards the next topic of conversation, which will revolve somehow around regulation in terms of alternative protein. And in fact, the next panel is called Composting a Polarized Agenda on Proteins from Animal Husbandry to Alternative Proteins. Discussions surrounding protein sources often produce controversy across EU member states. Please. And social groups. Today we will explore the evolving landscape from traditional animal husbandry to innovative alternatives and the role they each play in shaping a sustainable food future. And for that, I'm very happy to welcome on stage the panel, starting with our moderator, our very Lucy Wallace, Director of Global Relationships at EAT Food. Lucy, the floor is yours to introduce the panelists and the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tommaso, for that warm welcome. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm first going to introduce our panelists, and then we're going to start a discussion. This is going to be quite an informal discussion, and I hope you all enjoy listening to it and participating, and we will open for questions shortly as well. So our first panelist is Marco Carbonara, who is a livestock farmer from Umbria and an ecologist. He started his farm, Policaro, 15 years ago, and today it's a 100-hectare farm located on a volcanic plateau 550 meters above sea level, halfway between Rome and Florence. He uses agroecology and holistic management practices, raising animals on pasture, on fields and in woods, and growing fruit and olive orchards. And he avoids any kind of antibiotics and chemicals on the farm. He'll tell us a little bit about that, I think, in a minute. Relying on phytotherapy and a biodiverse, resilient ecosystem. And then next to Marco, we've got Ellie Walden, who's the Senior Policy Manager at the Good Food Institute, Europe. And GFI are a non-profit civil society organisation working on making both plant-based and cultivated meat, dairy and eggs as delicious, price competitive and convenient as possible. Ellie's been at GFI for over 4 years, but has a wealth of experience in public affairs with previous roles at the BMA, the European Parliament and the UK Parliament. So we're very lucky to have her here today. And then we have, next to me, we have Simon Kramer, who's a policy steward at the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, EARA. And EARA is a grassroots network of land stewards farming for systemic and holistic regeneration. Recently, he co-started a small farm in Sicily, and he's been working with a diverse array of stakeholders in the civil, public and private realms to support the growth of incremental and radical paths towards resilient and regenerative agri-food ecosystems. He focuses on transforming dissipative value chains into more regional and regenerative food value chains. And we're very lucky as well to have him here today. And then finally, on my left here, we have Robert Jones, who's the VP of Global Public Affairs at Mosameat. He's one of the pioneers, and Mosameat have been the pioneers of the cellular agriculture industry, innovating and scaling beef production technology to grow real meat to feed our fast-growing population in a sustainable, healthy and animal-friendly way. He's also the president of CELAG Europe, a newly established association representing the cellular agriculture industry within Europe. And he brings more than 2 decades of communications, government affairs campaigns, and public policy experience to the table. from fighting from science-based fisheries management to supporting innovative, alternative protein startups, advising the US Secretary of Commerce, and being a James Beard Foundation trained chef advocate. So Robert is absolutely passionate about reforming our global food system. So we have this amazing panel here today, and the reason that we're all here on stage together is to really sort of think about these two communities. The alt protein community, or protein diversification community, and the regenerative farming community. And I've found sort of over the past few years that these two communities who are, are working, or both of which working towards healthy, sustainable, resilient food systems, are often communities which don't agree on many things. There's often a little bit of conflict. And so I increasingly within conversations where this conflict is quite evident. And so a few of us together thought it would be a lovely idea to come on stage together and have a discussion with our audience here at EIT Food to see if we can unpick this slightly. Why do we not agree about things? What are the issues? How do we move forward? So what I want to start with is our farmer. We should always start with our farmer. So I'm going to start with Marco, and I'd love Marco to really describe your farm, describe what you do. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Umbria.
Is working? Yes. Okay, thank you everybody for having me here. What we do in our farm is mostly practice agroecology for producing regenerative results into the farm. So in terms of soil health, microbiota, biodiversity, water retainment, reducing erosion, and so on. We raise more or less 200 pigs in the pasture, 6,000-7,000 birds around the farm, 20 cow and a few other sheep and goats, around 150 animals. All the system is based on having these animals grazing with that system that is called rational pasture. Means that you should use the same plot of land for the same animal in different moments, and the same plot of land with different animals on the same one. Mean rotating cow, birds, pigs on the same plot in different moments. This improves biodiversity, this improves the quality of the soil, the microbiota of the soil, that give back to the animals and to the farmer a very high level of resilience, a very high level of general health. This is, let's say, we are inspired by the idea of One Health approach, So having healthy ecosystems for having healthy animals, healthy plants, nutrient, as the professor was saying before, food for everyone. So the farm is more or less 100 hectares. And for having all the animals on pasture, we need livestock guardian dogs that protect the animals on pasture and allowed us to do not have very strong physical fences for avoiding fragmentation of the habitat. So it's quite a complex system that is based on the idea that every single animal have a role into the ecosystem that you can, as a farmer, drive some way, trying to imitate as much as possible the natural environments. Okay.
Thank you, Marco.
You're welcome.
Ellie, so I think it would be really helpful if you could just describe a little bit about GFI's mission and what you do there, and sort of put that into the context of protein and what we're talking about today.
Yeah, of course. So firstly, just a huge thank you, Lucy, and EIT Food in general for organising this discussion. I think it's a super, super important one to be having, and I'm really glad that I've got this chance to be on this panel. So in terms of who we are at the Good Food Institute, so we are an NGO that is working to accelerate the alternative protein ecosystem. So accelerate the entire ecosystem of companies that are trying to recreate that experience of meat and dairy, but using plants or fermentation or cultivation processes. And the reason that we are focused on this goal of this part of the food system is because we think that this offers a solution that really taps into one of the key drivers for why our food system is in such a mess as it is today. And that is, kind of put simply, the fact that, us in the global north, we love the taste of meat and dairy so much that we are eating way, way, way too much of it, way more than can be sustainably supported by our planet's resources. And in Europe, I saw the other day we're eating 7 to 8 times more than would be recommended by the Eat Lancet kind of sustainable diet. So at GFI, we see these options as really providing a solution, because realistically, our view is if we're going to bring that level of demand all the way down to where it needs to be more sustainable, we're not going to achieve that just by telling people to eat less meat and dairy, to give up the foods that they love, that they've grown up with. And we think we actually need to give people options that satisfy what they're looking for in meat and dairy, but produced in other ways. So that's why we are focused on this goal. That's why we're passionate about what we're doing to advance the alternative protein ecosystem. And in terms of kind of how we do that in a kind of day-to-day basis, so we're an NGO, so we do a lot of kind of what we're doing today around this panel. We bring different voices, different people from around the food system together to sit around the table and work together on this. And on the question of kind of how that relates to the farming community, I think the farming community as a whole absolutely should and must be part of those discussions. I don't need to tell anyone here that farmers are completely foundational to what any future food system looks like, and that includes these alternative protein options. It's ultimately the farmers who are going to be picking the crops that go into these plant-based foods, for example. So I think it's about, we work to bring people around the table, and I think the first kind of mistake that I think I'll admit today that I think we have made as a protein diversification movement is that we haven't been good enough at maybe bringing all of the farming community around the table in those discussions. And especially I think this is important for the regenerative agricultural movement, because fundamentally I think, and based on our chats earlier, I think hopefully the panelists on this will agree that fundamentally I think we are working towards the same goal. We have chosen different paths to get there, and that's normal, that's natural. We are, the food system is a big place. We have different starting points into this discussion. But fundamentally, I think we are working towards the same goal and the same direction, that we both want kind of a more sustainable food system, one that moves beyond our current kind of dominance of these industrialized, intensive systems of animal agriculture. So, I think that's the first thing I'll say, that we need to get better at kind of including those voices, particularly from the regenerative agricultural community, and working together, because we need allies in this. The scale of the challenge of changing away from the current status quo is so big that I think we need all the support we can get, and we need to work together because we have that shared goal. And I'll just end on one kind of concrete example of the ways I think that not only should we as the protein diversification movement be listening to the views of the regenerative agricultural community, but also, making sure that our work actively supports their goals. And this is around land use. So we've been doing a lot of thinking about this at GFI. So we know that these other protein options, so it's plant-based or others, they use so much less land than animal protein because, bluntly, you don't need to feed crops, whereas you do with animals. So is that an opportunity to explore some of these synergies that I think we're going to talk about today? Can we, in other words, use the fact that shifting towards these options could free up the land needed in Europe to be able to expand kind of these extensive regenerative systems? And we commissioned a report on this, which was published earlier this year. This is a shameless plug. Please look at that report if you're interested in this. And that report found there is massive potential to do exactly that. So just one example, I think, of the synergies that we need to get better at exploring between these two movements.
Thank you, Ellie. And I love the fact that you mentioned these diversity of approaches, because diversity is very regenerative to me. I always think that regenerative agriculture is about diversity, but also the diversity of approaches we use is a regenerative approach to take to food systems. Simon, can you explain a little bit to us about EARA, the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, what you do and why this is needed at the moment within Europe?
Thank you, Lucy, and also thank you for hosting this debate and inviting us. With the ARA, we are started out with a similar objective as our little panel here today, which is kind of composting alienation into coalescing unity and diversity. So we have an amazing pioneering farming community that is ever more sophisticated in their ways of producing food and fiber in harmony with nature at high productivity rates, not only for food and fiber, but for ecosystem services and for regenerating biodiversity. And we set out really by trying to bring together this diversity of farmers for them to unite and do advocacy together, so that we do not are caught up in these dualisms anymore, that we say, oh yes, we need to produce, we need to feed the world, but to save nature we need to reduce production. Or if we reduce inputs so that we can save nature, we are reducing productivity. Or these kind of dualisms that in the end led to the Green Deal and the farm to fork strategy really not leading where we want to go altogether. And so these farmers come with a new legitimate voice in the policy discourse. We have farmers from large arable farms coming from the conservation agriculture movement, for example. We have farmers from the holistic grazing movement like Marco. We have farmers like Shaila in the south of Greece, her dad being the first organic farmer in Greece. Now Shaila is a huge pioneer in syntropic agroforestry. Then like market gardening, Nordic market gardening, CSA-based agriculture. And from this perception, we really try to advance in our thinking on how regenerative agriculture can be a fourth agricultural revolution. And maybe just to pick up on that is really also to overcome this dualism of nature and humans, that we need to spare land from humans so that nature can regenerate. We know already since 1928 actually that Vavilov, a Russian scientist, proved that the hotspots of terrestrial biodiversity are those where humans, indigenous societies, farmed for the longest time. So we have a lot of old biases which make us believe that we might need to spare land. I think it's all about what the regenerative pioneers are showing. It's about stewarding land. So exactly in what we created, climate change, we cannot leave land to itself. Then it's just further desertifying. If we look to the south of Spain, Italy and so forth, we need to be as active and in harmony with nature as possible to regenerate that land, to have a chance to feed all of us humans and feed all the biodiversity that we aim to regenerate.
Thank you, Simon. Robert, it would be great if you could really, you've got a wealth of experience in the sector. It would be great if you could reflect a little bit on the alt protein movement and, really where you think we've kind of gone wrong with protein diversification and with regenerative farming, and why there's so much disparity at the moment.
Yeah, thank you. Let me start with a couple of caveats real quick, and I'll answer your question. So the first being, I'm not here today to be an evangelist for cultivated meat. I think it's one of the solutions we should be talking about in a broader toolbox of protein diversification, and we should be thinking in that sort of systems way. The second caveat I want to reinforce, which Ellie mentioned, is we've lacked a lot of nuance in this conversation about the difference between the global north and the global south. And I think there's a lot of us, especially from the techno side of alternative protein or complementary protein, as I like to say, who've talked about this in a very unnuanced way about needing to eat less meat, and that's that's a very global north perspective, and I think we need to add that nuance back to the conversation. So where I think we went wrong, I think for those of us, I mean, I think there's wrong on both sides, but speaking for our industry in particular, I think where we went wrong is in the early days of coming up with these really innovative ways to make new proteins. We needed to raise massive amounts of capital in order to fund those startups to get off of the ground. And what's very clear is that the way you should raise excitement and talk to venture capital funds about what you're doing and how disruptive it is not the way you should talk to consumers or stakeholders in the food and value chain. And we lost sight of that. And so we had lots of replacement language, lots of disruptive language that immediately the other stakeholders in the food and agriculture value chain looked at and went, oh, you're trying to put us out of business. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to layer in our technology, our product offerings into a protein mix of the future. But I can see why people got their hackles up, and we helped polarize this conversation. That's why I like the idea of composting it. The last thing I'll say very quickly is I think we also have to think, again, back in a systems view of the challenge that we face. And what we know is not only will we have 10 billion people on the planet by 2050, but I think more importantly is that the FAO expects that meat consumption will rise by as much as 50 to 70% by 2050. Most of that is driven by a rising middle class in places like China and India that are eating more meat every day. Our panel in prep for this, we were talking about the pig high-rises that we're seeing in China now being built. These horrendous facilities to provide protein to these growing populations. And that is the North Star for me, is thinking, how do we avoid that future? How do we all work together to develop a protein mix for the future that feeds this growing planet, feeds the appetite for meat, but does it in a way that's healthy for people and the planet and better for animals?
Thank you, Robert. Marco, Simon, do you want to respond to that?
Honestly, I think this is a very, very important way to look at the question. Okay, so it makes sense to me what you're saying. Maybe the only thing that I would like to focus as a farmer is that, as we were speaking before, we should say decide what we expect from food production. If we expect that the food system is just providing food, or if we think that the food production is mainly, I want to say mainly, the tool for providing ecosystemic services. Because we always think about food, but we should think about water, we should think about soil erosion, we should think about oxygen, to carbon dioxide reduction. So this is maybe the only thing that at the moment is to clarify what we expect. What we expect. If we expect that food systems should change for fixing ecosystems, I think that regenerative agriculture should have a big part about this. This is the only thing I want to add.
Ellie, you've just taken the microphone. Did you have a thought on that? I love that. What do we expect from the food system? We've been looking at it from a different way. We've been looking at what we expect the food system to give us, but turning it on its head, what do we expect from the food system?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting change in our mindset for how we approach any kind of question about the food system. And I just really want to start by echoing everything that Robert said. I think being honest about how our movement has approached this question, I think there has been kind of this risk that we've got into a silver bullet mindset where we're so enthusiastic and we're so passionate about what we're doing, and that's why we're doing it, right? We've each chosen our part of the food system, and we're all passionate about what we're doing. But that does lead us to kind of maybe not articulate clearly enough that this is one part of the food system in the future. And there's absolutely, and I think I was trying in my remarks to say that, this is one part of how we get to reducing meat to a sustainable level. But yeah, just echoing everything that Marco said, I think there's so much that alternative proteins can't do. Alternative proteins are not a silver bullet. There are no silver bullets in something that is as complex as the food system. And those questions of kind of how do we provide food, but also in a way that kind of works with and replenishes our planet is something that I think is very much within the regenerative agriculture movement. And again, I think it's about, we have different paths, we've chosen different paths. We are focused on that goal of how do we get meat consumption down to the place it needs to be, but we absolutely need to start thinking more in terms of this systems approach about how do we think about food from these different perspectives and work with movements like the regenerative agriculture movement, because as I've said, we do have overall in the big picture the same goal in mind.
So how do we then repair then some of this that has gone before, some of this language use? And I think a lot of it is around language and around sort of need from the different communities. How do we start to repair some of that? Because this is, relationships take time. Trust takes time. Obviously it's great that we're all here together and you all agreed to be on stage together. And I absolutely love that. But what do we do? How do we get there?
I think in the sense of what we want to agree on is kind of the outgrowth of the CAFOs, of the concentrated animal feeding operations. And as a nutritional scientist shown before, I think one could even let's say, outgrow any herbivores mainly fed on grains. So we want to come to proteins that are fed in a way that stems from regenerating land use. And I think that is, for me, could be an approach to aid to that, because I think the alternative protein movement, and I think you are quite aware of this, has of course a responsibility to aid to their sourcing, that wherever it is produced, land stewards are enabled to do so in a regenerating way. And I think the other part could be also that when we talk about dietary habits and so forth, I think we can be very aware that there's a kind of a generational path dependency here. I mean, that takes even longer than Marco can regenerate successional stages of his ecosystem, or the ecosystem Chiara, his wife, and the family are blessed to be able to steward. And that in that sense we are able to put a focus really also on where are the sources coming from that feed into these proteins, and that they stem from regeneration, because otherwise it is always kept only in a efficiency lens. And I mean, we discussed this also. Yes, a net zero food system is great. A net positive food system on not only carbon but water, biodiversity is even better and absolutely necessary. So I think that can be something where we really should aim together to make that really the baseline and enable farmers to do that.
I think that's totally right. And to answer your question, I think there's a couple of things I would say. One is language matters, right? And so we have a responsibility in the complementary protein space to reevaluate how we frame what we're trying to do. And I think together with regenerative agriculture actors and stakeholders, we also have to identify really what are we working against, which you highlighted very well. I think that there's a vocal minority that is very loud right now, that is not necessarily representative of our end goal, which is reducing the amount of intensive animal agriculture. And it's interesting because I find that that vocal minority, which has really dominated the conversation until recently, I think policymakers are starting to see through it, is that they're romanticizing a type of agriculture that is more like what Marco does, but is still an outlier compared to intensive animal agriculture. And that romanticism is sort of obscuring the realities of what the overall system looks like right now and the changes that we need to make. So I think together, as we find our common ground, we have to talk to policymakers and say there's another path here, and there's some loud people on the side here that don't represent us. And we need you to look specifically at what we're saying, what our goals are. And I hope we can do that.
Do you think it's been fear that stopped people speaking out against the loud outlier people?
Well, I don't want to dominate this conversation, but I'll say what I saw is farmers across Europe had very good reason to be protesting, right? I mean, there's a lot of really serious challenges in the agriculture system, and farmers are bearing the brunt of that. But what I also saw was some chaos climbers jumping onto the protest and inserting topics into what was a legitimate conversation in order to advance an agenda. And I think we need to point out those chaos climbers, the Twitterati class that are sort of jumping into these conversations and inserting topics that are not necessary, and highlight that for decision makers.
Perfect, thank you. Does anybody have any questions in the audience that they'd like to add into the mix at this stage? She's coming with a microphone. Please tell us who you are and where you come from.
So hello, my name is Marua. I'm working in a research center in Belgium. I would like to thank you for this nice conversation. And it's great to diversify protein, but is there a defined list of alternative protein that we can produce? And can you please give us some example of this alternative protein?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's funny because before the panel we were talking about language and how we make sure we are being mindful in how we use language. And I think the term alternative protein means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For GFI, we mean 3 pillars. So plant-based burgers, plant-based milk that I think some are on offer today, fermentation techniques, and then cultivated meat, which I think I'll leave Robert to talk about. So that's for us at GFI what we mean by that term. But we were talking before, in a way, and obviously I defer to Simon and Marco on their thoughts on this, but in a way protein diversification could also mean these regenerative systems, because that is a break from the status quo where we're getting the majority of our meat from. So it's a really interesting and difficult to answer question, because I think this question of language is fundamental here.
Thank you for the question again. From a different point of view, what I can answer you is that for a farmer, a diversification of proteins means a diversification of mainly a diversification of the source. That means that we should eat much more diverse, that we should eat a lot of different plants that we don't eat now, that they are not sexy enough for the market, that we should eat every single part of an animal, that we should take advantage on seasonal food. I mean, there is a very wide lens that we can use for solving this problem, and we are here for taking some idea on the table. But I think that it is impossible to solve if we are not available to change the lens through we see the food systems. Again, what we expect from the production of food, not what we expect from the food production. Thank you.
I'll just add that I think for me, the term protein diversification is not just about a list of products. It's also thinking about methodology and making these proteins in a different way. And Ellie outlined some of the technological ways, but I would group regenerative agriculture as part of the protein diversification umbrella because it's going back and doing it a different, better way, a lower footprint way. And then I think the most exciting thing is that there's so many technological developments and innovation happening so rapidly that there's so many exciting things I think coming down the pipeline, not just for new types of complementary proteins, but ways for inputs, better inputs, and for farmers to do what they do better at a lower carbon footprint.
I would just add, maybe a little history. Our industrial food system at the outset of the industrialization was fed also by proteins. How the Europeans fed their rising populations was the first industrialized part of that food system were fisheries. So we had basically already Fordist-style fisheries in the Baltic and were exploiting the east coast of the today United States, Canada, long before we colonized it. So there were fishing rates going there. And today maybe we are at such a point again. And then just with a twinkling eye, I would say we don't only do it at a lower carbon footprint, but we must do it at a positive carbon footprint because we have to regrow the ecosystems both on land and in water that are able to regenerate our One Health, make us able to continue surviving within climate catastrophe and regenerate a health that we can deal with epidemics, pandemics, so forth, non-communicable diseases, all that stems from the way we feed ourselves in the last 200 years, which is not just proteins, but of course all kinds of food and the how it's produced.
Is there any more questions from the audience?
I have a question. Yes, this was fascinating, and I particularly liked the reflection around language and narratives. And of course, the question is how we reshape these narratives and these languages. And I'd like to offer a reflection. If we think about the way we source animal, meat, historically speaking, we switched from being hunters, and therefore, I'm imagining, the procurement of food only through hunting itself, and now the meat food, the animal food that we source is all coming from, husbandry is all coming from, cultivated, in a way, meat, if you want, cultivated, in the field through the animals and so on. And that is something that has been accepted. However, if we switch to the marine ecosystem, that is a big block because aquaculture, so the idea that we don't fish food, but actually we cultivate it in cultivations of fish, this is something that encounters a lot of resistance still. So maybe we could think that, through the passing of time, people have sort of made peace with the idea that we're not hunters anymore and that animal meat is sourced differently. So my question is, could it be that the change in narratives is only a matter of waiting for this to sort of flourish and blossom up, this sort of different diets or different attitudes of people towards alternative proteins? Thank you.
Honestly, I don't know, but I can tell you another question. Do we have time? This is the only thing I can tell you. I don't makes sense to me, but the question is, do we have enough time?
I didn't want to be the doomsayer, but I think that was exactly my thinking, is that, yes, I think you're right. There's sort of a natural integration of consumer attitudes catching up with, but we don't have a lot of time. For me, the other North Star that I think about a lot is 1.5 degrees. And we need to be moving quickly and transforming these food systems in order to get back within planetary boundaries.
I'd echo that. I mean, we're in less than a month's time, we're going to be in Azerbaijan for COP29, the climate COP. The biodiversity COP starts next week, I think next week. And then later in the year we also have the desertification COP. There's a poly crisis. We do not have time. It's a really fascinating idea, and I love it because things are evolving all the time, and culture is evolving, our language is evolving, but we need to think of ways to accelerate that. And so I think that's what is great about this panel, is because they're all people who want to accelerate it, and we just have to find a way. And I suppose that's the IT Foods role in a way, is to bring these people together, to have these conversations, and to take those discussions forward and accelerate it. So yeah, it's fascinating, but we need to move faster, definitely. Any more questions? We've got a couple of minutes left.
I have a thought I was going to add if there's no one. A topic that we haven't covered yet that I think is relevant is kind of going back to history again. If we look at how we are where we are today and going back to the Green Revolution, I mean, farmers did everything that we asked them to do, right? We needed to keep billions of people from starving. We switched how we were doing things. We embraced the Green Revolution, but we also financed it. And we are where we are today because we did exactly what we asked of farmers, but now we realize that there's some serious externalities of that. And as we're going to shift and think about the ways to do it better, whether it's regenerative, whether it's complementary proteins, we also need to be talking about how are we going to finance that transition. And I know that's a topic that's sticky, but right now we have perverse incentives in the agricultural system towards the exact problem that we have with intensive animal agriculture. And I would say one of the things our movements can work on together is talking to policymakers about how we need to be shifting those incentives and subsidizing and financing the transition that we want to see together.
Any thoughts on that from a farming perspective?
Yes, gladly. I mean, you're completely right. We spent $870 billion annually of global taxpayers' money to incentivize still this old hyper-intensive, productive, intensive agriculture. And I think last year at COP at Dubai, I hold a panel, and we came to the quite almost ironically funny conclusion that if we completely transform the 870 billion annually to give it to farmers in a way that's enabling them and incentivizing them to farm regeneratively, there are quite some scientists out there that believe that we could bring climate breakdown back into stabilization within 4 years. And that is a wide guess, but also is a very hopeful light. One other example from history I want to make is when the dinosaurs were around, it was much, much warmer on planet Earth. But the climate was stable. What we are experiencing now is droughts and hurricanes, floods. And that is what is really killing us, not 2-3 parts per million more of carbon in the atmosphere. And that we can get a more stable climate again, it's all about living plants. And those have to be regrown by farmers. And those can be also regrown in the oceans. We have indigenous fisheries of the west coast of the US, 3,000 kilometers of kelp forest, which indigenous people built into the coastlines. And this is what we have to regenerate, living plants on the earth. And therein, animals are accelerator if they are stewarded in the right way.
Yeah, I just wanted to end, I think, on a maybe a reflection for the future. I think exactly this question of how are we going to confront all of these perverse incentives that exist currently in our food system. I think that is an example where, fundamentally, I think we share the same vision, and there are synergies to be found in how we can work together to achieve that vision. So, I read the ERA paper on the CAP, and we agree with a lot in there. So I think we need to, as a two movements here, and I'm so glad we're doing this panel because it starts to get the conversation, I think, into a more constructive place than it has been in the past. But I think as these two movements, we should be really focused on the fact that we do fundamentally agree on the broad direction we're going in. We might have different tools in our toolbox and different emphasis on where we place those tools, but fundamentally we agree, and I think that's the most important thing, and we need to find the areas where there are synergies to work together. And I think, influencing things in Brussels in the next few years is a practical example of where we should be working together on that.
Thank you, Ellie. I just want to finish just by each of us just doing an ask to the other community. So, Marco, what would be your ask to the alt protein community?
I think that the thing we have more in common, or one of the things we have in common, is that we rely on plants for the future. Okay? And what I would like to ask you is to really choose in the best way as possible the source of your proteins for the future. So probably this can be even the bridge in between us. You need incomes for producing food. It's very important how we will choose this food and these incomes in the future. May I add a little thing? As we were saying, the plant is the base of the food, and the plant needs the sun. That is the only one that is an indefinite source of energy on this planet. Everything else is finite, is a certain amount of source of material. The point is this: animals and regenerative agriculture should improve photosynthesis, should improve the way we can use the solar energy. And what I can see as a farmer is that ecosystem doesn't work without animals. We need the ecosystems for rebuild the soil. We need the animals into the ecosystem for rebuilding the soil and maximize the photosynthesis and maximize the sun energy. So this is the point. For the future, I hope that we will find a way for diversify production of food, but being conscious that at the base of this there is the maximization of photosynthesis, and so all the other things that are related, so biodiversity, organic matter, and so on. So this, thank you.
So on the question for the other side, that's a tough one. The ask. I think it would have to come again to this point we've been coming back to on language, and I think my ask would be, please forgive us for having kind of been unnuanced and lazy in how we're talking about this and how we have talked about this in the future. I think fundamentally we do agree on the big picture, and the fact that we have, made lazy generalizations about animal agriculture has not helped. The fact that we've kind of fallen into this silver bullet thinking at times has not helped. So my ask would be, please forgive us for having made these mistakes in the past, and please don't lose sight of the fact that we do fundamentally agree on the big picture, and we need all the support we can get in helping each other. So please look beyond that and see the big picture, and let's explore ways to work together.
He already cut us off. Thank you. Very nice and humble and reflective ask. I would then make a pragmatic ask. Please work with us on our advocacy alliance for making sure that in 2026-27, both the European Multi-Annual Financial Framework and the CAP are laser-sharp focused on enabling our agri-food ecosystems to regenerate.
Yes, I'm in on that. I'll make a specific ask. I think we should look at the entities represented on this stage applying to the impact funding framework at EIT to do specific research on the cover crops that you can grow in order to give the nutrition we need for our cells. Because I think you're right, that's the bridge, the nutrition that we need for our industry and your ability to make money, in between crops is really a place we can build on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robert, and for that, plug of the IFF. You can find more about that on our website, our impact funding framework. And it just remains for me to say thank you to our wonderful panelists, Marco, Ellie, Simon, and also Robert as well. And my ask of the community is really just remember peace, remember love. And I would like us all to have a hug at the end and remember our friendship. So thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel, not only for discussing alternative proteins, but probably also for helping us to develop an alternative thinking about the future of the food systems. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had a nice lunch break time. You had time to explore the marketplace, the startup lounge. You had a nice lunch, hopefully, and now you're fully recharged for the afternoon program here at Next Bite. This is going to be our last session on the Net Zero food system event track. It has been quite a journey, and somehow it's already time to edge towards the conclusion of this event track. But before doing that, indeed, there is still a fantastic panel discussion on a very relevant topic, which is money, as to say it in the most, let's say, brutal and potentially trivial way, but indeed one topic we're all very interested in. So without any further ado, let's move towards towards the panel itself and towards the title of the panel, which is I got lost somehow. Well, I have it there. Greening the bottom line, mobilizing finance for regenerative agriculture. So we'll learn about the mechanisms, innovative funding sources potentially, and indeed also the challenges maybe that come with regulating and de-risking finance for, of course, regenerative agriculture. It is my pleasure to then introduce our panelists, distinguished panelists today. We have Alice Legris de la Salle, Head of Impact and Regenerative Financing at AXA Climate. Hi, Alice. Mikao Sivek, Head of Decarbonization and Biodiversity Product at BNP Paribas. Jorge Pinto Antunes, Policy Officer at the European Commission Directorate General for Climate. Adam Bautza, President of Terra Nostra Agricultural Development Foundation, and then our very Eva Karolewska, Senior Project Manager on Startup Support, and according to the slide, new Director of Global Relationships at PAT Food. Thank you very much. I hope you're going to enjoy this session, and see you later.
Good afternoon. Are you alive? Do you feel well after a nice Italian lunch? Okay, so let's kick off. I'm very happy that we managed to gather here brains from different parts of Europe, and we are going to discuss important topic, as Tommaso mentioned, money. I would like to kick off with a short introduction. Could you please share with the audience what you are doing, how you are engaged in scaling up regenerative agriculture in your places? Let's kick off with Alice.
Hello, everyone. What I do, so AXA is a financial player, right? We are an intra first and also an investor. And so we are doing two things for the moment with regenerative agriculture. Is one, having developed an insurance of the transition to protect the farmers when they shift from conventional to regenerative practices. And we hope to scale that further. And the second one is a fund that we have co-created with Unilever and Tikehau Capital. Tikehau Capital is a fund manager. And this is a fund that is dedicated to regenerative agriculture, and we invest in solutions for that transition.
Michał Siwek, nice to meet you. Good afternoon. Currently, I'm responsible for the, let's say, two main areas within BNP. One is decarbonization. And if you're talking about decarbonization of the bank, so scope 3 is like 95%. So, we are as sustainable as our clients are. So we are very much dependent on the emissions of our clients. And second field of my responsibility is biodiversity. My background is most of my life, it's already 20 couple of years of experience in banking. Most of my life spent as a corporate banker, working directly with the corporates. I used to work for 10 years for Rabobank, so very much organization very much dependent on the food agri value chain. And before this job, I was responsible for competence center for BNP Paribas, responsible for food and agri value chains. And coming back to the questions about our engagement into the regenerative agriculture, to give you the context, in Poland, BNP Paribas has market share about 30% in agriculture and about 20% in food processors. So we are biggest food and agri bank in Poland. So let's say the challenge of the transition is also the challenge of our clients, is the challenge of my organization. And regenerative agriculture, we will be talking about that later on, is one of the drivers of the decarbonization. So it's one of our priority projects in order to deal with our emissions, not mentioning other aspects, benefits of the regenerative agriculture. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jorge Pinto Antunes. I work at the European Commission, and in the European Commission I work on the direction that is responsible for climate policy in the EU. And there, specifically, I work in the unit that is driving forward the policies for agriculture and the land-based sector in general. We've been very much busy working on a regulatory framework to make sure that we can support regenerative agriculture, because regenerative agriculture will be one of the solutions for us to mitigate emissions in the agri sector. We know that if we want to achieve our goals for 2050, which is climate neutrality in Europe, in the EU, all the sectors will need to contribute to this. And agriculture is one of the sectors that still can do a bit more. It's not going to be easy, but so we need to find the right incentives for this to happen. And specifically my work is around what we can do with financing institutions to make sure that the necessary financial flows will go into supporting regenerative agriculture.
I have my own mic. Hello everyone, afternoon. I'm Adam Baucha, I'm responsible for Tarnostra Foundation, and I used to be a farmer, or I am a farmer, an agronomist, and I used to work in the biggest farms in Poland. We manage more than 35,000 hectares in Poland, and we start our journey from 2010 with regenerative agriculture. We didn't used to call it like that, but it was the regenerative agriculture and biological agriculture, and we want to share as a foundation our knowledge and practice knowledge with other farmers in Poland, and not only with farmers, because we learn them, we prepare some workshop, we try to explain them what is this regenerative agriculture and how to be and prove those type of production, but we also want to explain other guys in this whole value chain what is this regenerative production. For example, millers, bakers, and other companies, also banks and financial institutions, to show how to cooperate with farmers, how farmers can prove those type of production, how we can help them, how we can support them, advise, and maybe help in this transition, and how important is this type of production?
Thank you, Adam. I would like to kick off with a question regarding the financial gap. In order to scale up regenerative agriculture and really make an impact and make it the mainstream, let's say, way of producing our food, we need a lot of funding for this. At this stage, we have a financial gap estimated at from 250 billion US dollars up to 450 billion dollars yearly for next 10 years. This is according to the Rockefeller Foundation report. There is a lot of different data available, but we know that we have a gap for different reasons. It's lack of the capital. It's also, the need to adjust the capital as well to the transition. So I would like to ask a little bit maybe provocative question. What happens if we don't bridge this gap? Alice, what do you think?
I believe I believe it's a matter of food production resilience. In fact, if we don't change how we produce food, we might not be able to produce food anymore. Just because we are under a changing climate, it's super sad to see how the productions are affected this year, but it's not the first year that it is happening. So I guess it's really a matter of business continuity for farmers, but also for corporates in the food and ag value chain, and it's also a matter of health and sovereignty for our own countries.
Michał, would you like to add something?
Of course, and because we have limited time, so I don't want to list all the benefits on regenerative agriculture. On top of that, what Alice already has said, so definitely we are also losing another environmental, let's say, benefits. So soil health, you know how much we are degrading the soils in the European Union. 60-70% of the soil is degraded already. So as Ali said, we are exposing at the risk the entire food system. Of course, there's biodiversity, of course, restoration. There is cycle of nitrogen, the cycle of water. This kind of practices, regenerative agriculture improved such a cycles. And of course, on top of that, we have the issue not only about the reduction and the avoidance of the emissions, but also the removals. And regenerative agriculture can be a natural-based solution for, it's one of the top 4 pillars of natural-based solutions of carbon dioxide. So not implementing such practices, we are losing this huge driver of removals. And we know we have emitted already so much greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, so we also have to parallelly deal with the removals. And of course, on top of that, we are losing the opportunity to make agriculture more profitable, because I guess Adam can confirm, right implementation of the regenerative agriculture decrease the cost of the production in agri sector, and of course improved its profitability by also better revenue. So that's another aspect. And on top of that, of course, we can also discuss offsetting and carbon credits, which are also important from the perspective of netting. And I will put dot here because of time pressure.
It's no-brainer, right? Like if
simple,
we want,
like that, just matter of implementation and let's say coordination among entire ecosystem to do so.
It's not only the question of mitigation; it's also the question of resilience and adaptation. You know, the possibility of producing food in the future, basically enough food for everyone. Yes, since you already set up a little bit the scene about, you discuss carbon credits, insetting, offsetting, I would like to ask now, Georges, you are very much engaged, hands-on, on creating policies, guidelines, and so on. We would like to know more about this, and I'm sure that the audience is very interested in what's going on, when we can expect the regulations and so on. Everybody is watching the European Commission, even the biggest companies, when they are thinking about their frameworks, they want to be aligned. So can you share with us insights?
Yes, it's not a secret. So the more we share and disseminate our work, the better. And we've actually been quite proud of what we've been able to do so far. And I guess maybe to start a little bit before that, because it's a no-brainer for most of us that it's about resilience, and it's also about living up to our commitments to the next generations in terms of climate change issues. So why are we not then transforming agriculture as fast as we should be doing it?
Why?
So I think, well, there are probably a lot of answers to that. But from our side, I think one first aspect that we need to tackle is we need to have certainty that regenerative agriculture is really producing what we want it to produce. So we need to be certain, to have certainty about these practices. So this is why, as part of the work we've been doing in the Commission, we put out a regulation which is on carbon removal certification. Basically, it's the regulatory framework that will make sure that whoever wants to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions in the agricultural sector will be able to account for this. So how do we go about this? So we need sound methodologies to do this. And this is what we've been doing in the Commission. So last year we agreed on the general frame, what regenerative agriculture, and when I speak about regenerative agriculture, we speak about this under the carbon farming, basically, label, if I can put it this way. So we need to understand what is carbon farming and how do we measure inputs and how do we measure sequestration of carbon in agricultural soils. So we've been working on the general frame, but now next year we will come up with very specific methodologies that will tell all the operators and farmers specifically how much they will be sequestering carbon if, for instance, they use tillage, if they do regenerative agriculture, if they do any other sort of practices. And this is just important not just for farmers, but it's also important for those who we also need to address, which is the economic sector, which needs to bring the financing into this.
Also corporates, right?
Also corporates, very much so. They need to be sure that the money that they invest is really producing results. And this is also what our regulatory framework will be able to do. So next year we will have methodologies for carbon farming, which will be including also regenerative agriculture practices. And then at some point in the future, we will also want to come up with some kind of instrument. We still are considering what this can be, and on how can we encourage more financing to go into these practices. And for us, will be about looking at our instruments. We have the CAP, which already at this stage finances some pilot projects, has been quite good as part of the eco schemes in doing some knowledge, learning into this, but we need to do more, and this more will be part of our financing agenda in this area.
Okay, so next year we can expect the framework, right?
Next year we can expect the methodologies.
Yeah.
So people know for sure, if I do this specific practice in my field, how much will I reduce in terms of carbon mitigation in the atmosphere? How much my soil will sequester carbon, for instance? So this will be already next year.
Okay, I see that.
Sorry, but it depends on many factors: weather and temperature, humidity, and everything. That, like, if I understand properly, the effect of the regenerative agriculture and the results should be sequestrated carbon in the soil. I think the effects and results of the agriculture should be not only regenerative. Whole agriculture should be quantity and the quality of the food that we produce as a farmers, and with the lowest impact on the whole environment, not only in the soil. Yes, on the soil. It is agriculture. We need to understand as a farmers that we produce food. We need to produce more and more food, yes, because we have problems, and we know those problems, and we need to produce a better quality of the food.
Yeah,
because
long term, of course.
Yes, because everyone wants to be more healthy, yes, and the effect of this managing of this regenerative production is also reduction of the emission, yes. Soil has opportunity to collect the carbon, yes, because organic matter is not only organic matter, it is carbon in the soil, yes? Plants produce carbon, put it to the soil. And this is the effect of holistic managing of the whole production, yes? Not a single practices that you can change as a farmer, for example, cultivation method, yes? And you will sequestrate more. it's not going like this. It's not so simple. We need to have holistic point of view.
George?
No, I agree a lot with what Adam is saying. I was just using the metric of carbon because this is the metric that we use in our service. But when you have more carbon in the soil, you also have, for instance, more biodiversity.
Yes, of course.
So this is just one of the metrics, but it's a more of a holistic approach. So I absolutely agree with this.
But Adam, since you have a mic, I would like to hear from you. How much does it cost to make a transition as a farmer? How does it look like from your perspective? What you would need? Are you looking, at the private funding, public funding? What is very important, to do the shift and to start working on a bigger scale?
It depends because of the scale of area that we manage. We have many farmers in Poland, in Polish ground. We have many farmers that has technological machinery, equipment, precision farming, everything they have, but they don't have knowledge how to do it maybe in proper way. Yes,
so the knowledge is
the
very
knowledge.
important piece
We have huge lack of knowledge about how to do it and why is it so important. Yes, because as a farmers we need some proofs because I need to be competitive with other farmers, not only in my country, now in the whole Europe, for example, yes, with Ukrainian farmers, with other farmers, yes, I need to be competitive and I need to have some instruments, some tools, how to show other guys, for example, who buy from me my materials, my goods, wheat, sugar, beets and others, yes, how to show them why my goods are better than the other ones. Yes.
So the data and evidence is key here.
Yes, it is a key. Yes, we need to have something to precisely collect the data, to verify the data, because it's not so simple that we will give the farmers some platform, some tools, and said, okay, you can put the data from your farm. Yes, it is not so simple because someone needs to verify is it true or not, and someone who knows and have knowledge, agriculture knowledge. Yes, because it's not so simple because farmers can put there anything. Yes, and when some companies, for example, millers, will go to farmer and said, "Okay, I want from your farm wheat with lowest carbon emission." Yes, then farmers can, sorry, but we cannot trust everyone and farmers and everyone. Yes, and farmers can put, for example, that he used only 100 kilograms of some fertilizers. Yes, but really he used 200. Yes, and it's not so
So
easy.
the data, but also
The data,
funding. What about the funding?
Of course, but I think the funding needs to go from those companies who buy from farmers, from banks also, because bank has opportunity to have maybe better credits or something like that. Yes, insurance is also, but we need to take risk of it. Yes, and regenerative agriculture, if we will have and can show the level of regenerative agriculture in every single farm, for example, yes, we can diversify the risk because the highest level of regenerative agriculture, the farm with the highest level, have better crop rotation, yes, and the risk is diversified. Is going, that there is many instruments, but I think the money needs to go from companies who buy goods from farmers because they have money for it. But we need to prove them why they need to pay for it more now. Yes, they need to have proofs, not only some ideas or something like that.
So I would like now come to Alice and to Michał to ask about the data and also to ask about the financial instruments that are already in place or has been tested or will be as well implemented within the next months.
Yes, and can I react to what Adam
Sure.
said? We are close to, I want to quote Unilever, and there is someone from Unilever in the audience. They are quite involved in Regenerative projects, and they are supporting for, I think, the first 5 years, and they are quite financing a lot the farmers. But what I can say is that the working capital available from Unilever is way lower than the one available at AXA. So the food and ag corporates, they need this transition to happen for many reasons. And I think mainly for not being disrupted in their supply chain, above all. But they don't have money, not so much. Sorry to be disappointed to you, but the money, I can give you an order of magnitude. In the financial sector, the amount of money in stock available in the world is about 400,000 billion euros in the world, right? If we take 1 or 2% of this money, we can close the financing gap for climate and biodiversity together, right? 1 or 2%.
How?
No, but how I will come to that, because I think it's not so easy. But I just want to give another magnitude. We can consider that Nestle, Danone, Unilever should finance it all. I think it's not going to happen. So then go back to the financial sector. Our own responsibility is to flow money where it matters, right? And that's a bit my own mission, is to shift some capital, starting with my own group, to something that matters for the next generation. And I believe agriculture is a topic that is too often underestimated, not considered at all by financial sector. Because it is seen as not profitable, it is seen as, this is the bottom of the economy, and we are at the top of the economy. We are bankers, we are investors, and these are farmers. This is how it works, right? It's an interpretation. So, if we want the financial sector to shift more capital to agriculture, we need to prove that it is a profitable investment. There is no, we should not be shy about this. An investor or a banker, the only two things they consider is risk and return. They need to invest money for something that is risk and return, a good profile of risk and return. It's nothing but that. Impact is nice, but it's a cherry on the cake, okay? Even though I would like to be able to financialize impact, it's not happening yet. So if we want we need to have a good risk and return. And so going back to what you asked, how to scale more capital, because it's still very niche, the funding for regenerative agriculture. This is where I guess we should consider more and more the public and private space together, is to blend finance from public and private in order to have the right risk return. So I give you an example. We want to invest in projects, in Poland, for example, but we see that it's a bit risky. There are many different risks with respect to agriculture. Maybe the public European finance could say, I will put the first line of risk, I will give a guarantee, somehow guarantee. It's not a subsidy, it's different. Kind of a first loss guarantee. And then the private money would be de-risked with a good risk and profile return. And then it's much easier to flow money instead of going and try and convince people that biodiversity matters. For a banker or for an investor, sorry to say that it's not really happening so far. It's always a fiduciary duty to people that give their money, and we all give money to our bankers and pension funds and others or insurers. We need return. You need return from your investment, right? But that's exactly the same for financial sector. So we need to not to be naive that impact is not going to be the new gold or the new return for financial sector. We need to de-risk, and I think that's where the public sector should play a role, together with the private sector, to take a responsibility.
Do you have examples of some tools that you have been testing or some instruments?
Well, there's one thing that I believe in this transition. I think it's not really capex intensive for farmers. It's more a matter of risk. You mentioned education, because it's the first way to de-risk. And then that's where insurance could play a role, is to somehow to give a financial insurance to replace the chemical and mechanization insurance. Before, with conventional insurance, you use chemicals and mechanization to have good yield. Now you need to remove that. So what do? You need maybe financial insurance. So we have developed an insurance of the transition, but to be honest with you, if it's not subsidized by the CAP, it's not going to scale. So yeah, back to the public regulation.
Yes, I agree with most of what Alice is saying, but there is also the case to be made that financial institutions also need to, how do I put it, I wouldn't want to call it an ethical obligation. It's not about this, but it's about making sure that we know what we want to achieve in terms of our commitments to the future, to the next generations. And this means that we want to have climate goals as part of what we do, me personally, but financial institutions as well. And this is why also in their accounts, in the way they calculate their their business case, their business models. It needs also to be interiorized this. So I understand that from a financial institution perspective, of course, we are there to make more money. That's perfectly reasonable. But in doing this, we also need to take into account, things like these goals. And to be specifically, as part of what we're trying to achieve, for instance, and now with the regulation on corporate social responsibility, where corporates will need to detail how much they have in terms of emissions, and there is then the pressure there for them to go down in terms of those emissions. Now, this, as a cost, as a financial, can be concrete, and this needs to be taken into account by financial institutions. And this is why I think there is a good future for farmers, because there is a huge demand for this decrease in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and the sector can do this, and this needs to be paid. And I see the financial institutions, but corporates as well, in general, to pay this. But I agree with Alice that the business case needs to be very, very clear.
Yeah.
And this is where probably we need to work more
Regulations
on
and compliance is an important factor for sure, and driver.
just to also, sorry, I don't want to monopolize, but I also agree with Alice that there is a role to be done by public organizations, and possibly help in terms of de-risking some of these investments is something that we should be doing more, and I think it's part of our thinking. But yeah, we need to work it out, who does what and when.
Also, just short comment, we've been building at the moment regenerative agricultural landscapes in Europe, where we are putting public money that we have as EIT Food, and it will be matched with the funds from corporates, and also we are engaging financial institutions, building like ecosystems around the transition to scale up and build the cases. But Michał, I'm looking at you because you're a banker. For sure you have something to say here.
So many, digressions here. So definitely I agree also with Adam that it's not about only CO2, let's say, reductions and sequestration. I'll just say that sometime, in some extent, it is one of the big drivers for entire value chain, leaving behind other aspects which you have to deal with. It's another discussion. Coming back to the financial institutions, so we have different business models. I'm just simple lending, let's say, guy. You have some different profile of your job, so different point of view. So from our perspective, it's no-brainer. We would all understand what are the benefits. Maybe not entire spectrum again, but we understand that regenerative agriculture is carbon sink and firstly instrument for decarbonization, and we will be calculating decarbonization. But the issue is we don't have definition, or it's good excuse for the bureaucratic organization. Banks are bureaucratic. They have to have some proofs because they have to somehow go through the audit. Let's simplify the story. On the other hand, we don't have, let's say, all those measures, and they have to be science-based. You know how many scandals, how many scams, how many, let's say, controversy we had with, for example, Vera and entire system. So the more, let's say, the market we have to be somehow regulated from the perspective of which aspects of the sequestration, of the reductions we take into account. It has to be science-based. It has to be tested in the field in different conditions, because, as you said, the issue with the natural-based solutions is they are not so simple to measure because of the lack of the track record, lack of the good methodology, and then the conditions will affect the results of the sequestration. So if you would like to do in-setting, offsetting, I believe you understand the difference. Here also too many words. I don't want to go to the definitions. So if you would like to make proper estimation, because calculation is too strong word, you have to have all those matters to go properly through it. So to start from the difficulties. The bright side is what I told you at my first slot. We are as emissive as our clients are. So the less emissive as our farmers who are our clients, the less emissive is Unilever, Nestle, or Danone, the less issue we have. So again, we don't have to encourage us. Do we have capital for that? Yes, we do. also coming back to the return on equity. I believe we sometimes take into account agriculture as a sort of abstract sector. It's not abstract sector, it's entire value chain, starting from the input and the group of interest there. Then it's agriculture, there are processors, there's retail, there's us, there's food waste, and circular economy. With ceteris paribus assumption, yes, it's difficult to make it, this case, profitable, but you have to change entire system. Therefore, we are coming also back to the cooperation. And the simplest way to simplify the picture is, let's say, loans. Again, let's use the word loans. Loans with cooperation with the off-takers, such off-takers like large corporates, which will drive the transformation. And what Adam said, you look at the cash flow. Who is the cash flow provider for the farmer? European taxpayer, and the corporates and the banks who are lending money because you need working capital and you need some capex for investment. Just those, let's say, platform for KPI, we have to have joint KPIs, let's put it this way. All we have the same KPIs at the end of the day because we want to decarbonize our economy and we want to use this driver for removals. Joint KPIs with regulator, with banks and with the off-takers of the regenerative agriculture. And the case, for example, of McCain, 2030, entire raw material pool has to be from regenerative agriculture. Just join such a...
So we need to really bring all those stakeholders to the table
and
and
it's
work
doable.
together.
Yes,
Otherwise,
you don't have to convince,
yeah,
I would say. Of course, there is some difficulties with lack of the agronomies, lack of the... Of course, but again, on the strategic level, everybody agrees that that makes sense. And you can make return on investment also there because it's entire value chain and you have to change the system, not only punctual one thing.
And maybe public money, when we will change something that public money will pay for the effects and results, it can help to scale it, yes, because now we have eco schemes and other subsidies, yes, additional money for farmers for changing something, but we are paying now for some practices, yes, but we don't know the effects. Maybe when we will pay for the results. For example, if the farmer in every single year will show and proves us that he, for example, increase soil organic matter on their field, yes, okay, you are a good farmer, regenerative farmer, yes, you have more money. Not for single practice. Maybe he's plowing in the whole season, but he increased the soil organic matter. That I mean that it is not so simple, yes. Pay for the results, and maybe then we will have farmers and more farmers, because if someone will, for example, have more 300 or 400 euros per 1 hectare, yes, then the neighbor and other farmers also wants to have more. Then he needs to change something to show and prove that, okay, I have better fields, better soil and other things, yes?
Yes, building cases. George, would you like to add something? And then I will think about the questions, because I will give a floor to the audience. You will be able to ask your questions.
Very quickly, because I think what Michael was saying, it is very important, this idea of the KPIs, that we all are on the same page on this. Yeah. And this is exactly what we're doing by bringing forward this regulation on carbon certification, carbon removals, so that we know exactly, scientifically, transparently, in a reliable manner, what we are all doing. Yeah. And this is, I think, very important, and I wanted to understand, to emphasize, because only once we have this, then we can have the corporates and the private sector coming into this agenda.
Yeah, but
I don't want to say that
we need to move quickly as well to build cases and to collect evidence as well, so that we are able to prove something to the farmers, to the corporates, to the financial worlds, to build sound KPIs as well, to have like a benchmark and so on. Do you have any questions? Yes, please. Oh, sorry.
I was just wondering whether it would be an approach to reach for compliance effectiveness, because out of different pieces of law, maybe also nature restoration law, there might be opportunities to find those cross sections between resources, emissions, and due diligence, especially when we're because of the climate change, facing increasingly stranded assets in areas that are continuously being flooded. So how do you think you can also change the way you are calculating risk? Because obviously it's not just the economic profit that you need to take into account, but also the due diligence and the environmental effects.
Elise?
Further than just the carbon stuff.
Thank you.
Yes, maybe here I want to share what we are starting to do with my company, so AXA Climate. We are looking at a territory. Let's take the example of the north of France that was highly flooded, Nord-Pas-de-Calais. It was flooded 3 times this year. It's terrible. And so here, the solutions for protecting this area from flooding is to have agricultural soils that are more healthy, obviously, because this is the way to retain water. Of course, there are some problematics around artificialization of soils, but mainly we need the arable lands to be able to preserve water, and that's good also for the ag production. So indeed, what is also a more holistic approach we need to have is looking at one landscape, one territory, to consider agricultural lands as well as other economic activities, and they will help each other in the adaptation. And so more and more, I mean, AXA Climate was creating on climate adaptation, not climate mitigation. So more and more, we see this topic of resilience. We see some lands that become not insurable anymore, and that's why insurer just leave these areas. California is one example, for example. If you have no more insurance, you have no business, right? So what we try and understand is how to act collectively at a territorial level to enable this climate adaptation, and agriculture has always a role to play in having more healthy soil that would retain water, but also work on some very good cycles in terms of water. Water quality is one topic with agriculture as well that can help. So indeed, and here it's another lens, is this cooperation between different type of economical players in one territory. And this is even another level of complexity, but it's an interesting playground to consider this territory.
Anybody else would like to take it? Michał?
I would say, that's my private opinion, I would say banks are less advanced than insurers because there are, let's say, less directly exposed to such a risk. So I believe, let's say, in general, we are just building this competence, somehow following to what has been developed in insurance market. However, let's call them ESG questionnaires, which we have for our every new loan, every new contract, we are asking about those aspects. However, it's still declarative, and how to monitor very precisely. I think it is still to go, especially I would say in Europe, which in some extent is not Florida or California, as you said. In some extent, if you are talking, let's say, banks are usually much more local than so they can somehow manage that by local people. So I would say we are not as much advanced with with those precise tools.
Thank you. We have more questions? Yes.
Hey, thanks for all the information and coming from your different perspectives on this issue. When I think of systems and I think of food and nutrition and agriculture as a system, how you design the system is kind of the outcomes that you create. And you're coming at it from different goals and different purposes. Sort of looking at your own industries, what would you advise policymakers to be able to do in order to design systems that support what food really is? Is it carbon farming? Is it investment? But bigger goals. How could your industries be supported by policies that help your own specific industries create tools that support a system that is more holistic?
Who wants to take this one? Thank you for very interesting and very comprehensive question.
We have to have sort of consensus, let's call it political consensus, what is food system about? Because it's not about agriculture, it's about food system. How to deal with input provider huge money and a lot of group of interest, how to deal with, because I guess we can continue this topic. What is the biggest obstacle in the field that regenerative agriculture is not implemented is providers of the artificial, synthetic stuff, let's put it this way. Then, of course, we have to take into political, let's say, consensus. What is the added value of land use? Because let's say we can assign also economical value to the ecosystem services. That's something still abstract. We don't even, most of people, let's say average people, doesn't know this term and how much we have been benefiting for our entire evolution has been benefiting for this ecosystems. And without this consensus, in some extent, it will be, I can imagine, difficult, because you can imagine different subsectors of food production. Let's say beef producers has completely different point of view than tomato producers. And also let's try to anticipate what will be in the 2-3 decades, not in coming elections, because the issue is the
Thinking
election.
long term, right? Adam, it would be really great to hear from you, like from a farmer.
I think it will be impossible to create one standard, one framework for the whole Europe or for world, yes, because we have different type of productions, we have different type of agriculture, and it is very difficult to have one big holistic standard, for example, for the regenerative agriculture, because in Spain, in France, and in Poland, we have different type of crops, production, lands, and other things, yes, and when we want to have one standard, I think it's impossible to do it. We need to adapt for production, for type of agriculture, regionally, yes? And it is, I think, for me, the very difficult to do it, yes? Because we have so many things that depends, and they have impact on the whole agricultural production, that I think from a politician's point of view, it is very hard to do it, that you need to have time to do it properly and correctly, because scientists in every single country have researchers about soil quality, yes, about food quality and everything. And this is different type of agriculture everywhere. And one standard is impossible for me. We need to have more. For example, in one Europe, I think we will have maybe 2, 3, or 4 standards that will show, for example, production of commodities like wheat, oilseed rape, potatoes, and others, and other standard for vegetables, other standard for example, olives, fruits, and others. Yes, because it's different type of agriculture, and it's not so simple to do it, and in the simple way. Yes, because in one direction.
Thank you, Adam. We have time for one more question from the audience. Oh, we have more? Okay, let's try to squeeze 2 questions more. Yeah?
I'm Rafał from Biotrex. Thank you so much for everything you shared with us. So that is very valuable. You can see a lot of things is happening from every part of the sector. Financial sector is very important, and the same of the creation of policy which comes from European Union. That is also very important. Over past couple of months, I can hear a lot about biodiversity, soil services, also biodiversity credits. That is because that kind of the tunnel vision about carbon, what is the only one way to measure soil and change in the climate, maybe that is the danger. So my question is to you about the next step related to the soil as the asset of biodiversity, and in terms of the risk mitigation, because we know that soil is the living thing, not only the thing for the carbon dioxide. How can you see that in the next steps beyond the carbon vision?
It's not just about carbon vision, because this is just a metric that I've used because I come from DG Klima. We are very much concerned about carbon, but like I tried to convey before, this is a good metric to use. We know, and this is scientifically proven, and I guess farmers also know, I'm not a farmer, but if we actually sequester more carbon into the soil, this is a much richer soil. And if it's a much richer soil, there is more biodiversity in these soils, there are more uses for this soil. So we are creating wealth in very generally in terms of soil health. So this is what is our vision. And that's what we've been working on. But we need to start somewhere. And the carbon for us is just one metric because we know it's a good metric. It also provides information about other things which are important. And I should also stress that as part of the work that we're doing in terms of the carbon farming, as part of our regulatory framework, you will be able to account for these units of carbon farming, but these units of carbon farming are supposed to be about carbon, but they are also supposed to be about co-benefits. And these co-benefits, as part of our legislation, will need to be spelled out. So it will not just be about saying, okay, I do this and it has more carbon in the soil. No, it will have to be about, I do this practice, I do regenerative agriculture, I sequester more carbon, but I also provide this other co-benefit, this other service. This will also be spelled out as part of our regulatory framework, because we don't want this tunnel vision. It's not us.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and then I would like to conclude with you of our speakers.
Thank you. My name is Sean from Gabbana Foods. My question is on risk and risk appetite from the finance sector, because one of the main issues that comes out is the need for successful cases for showcasing proved technologies. So how are you approaching the risk appetite in the finance sector? Because we see it being applied to other spaces, so from plant-based foods to other emerging technologies to cell agriculture. There's a risk appetite from investment side, from the capital markets to say, okay, this seems to work, let's kind of go in and see what happens. What's limiting the finance sector into saying, okay, regenerative agriculture seems to work, let's go in and kind of create the results and the cases we need to validate our greater push into the market and putting money further into regenerative agriculture.
Alice, Michał?
First of all, I think there are different ways in investing in this transition. You mentioned the supply chain. There are different stakeholders, and we can invest indeed in companies that are the new input, for example, bio input companies. We already done that. That's easy. I must say it's easy because these are companies that prove to be profitable, and so it's easy to invest. Where it is for me difficult to invest now is more as an infrastructure lens. So invest somewhere between the farms, the lands, the real land, something tangible with farmers. For the moment, it's difficult to invest in that space, to finance that space, as far as I'm concerned. And we can make an analogy. Renewable energy, it's a no-brainer for investor now. It's easy to invest. It's de-risked. It has good returns. So it's spreading super well. We need to create that for regenerative farming. And we are not there yet. So again, investing in some plant-based protein venture that would grow, maybe you have VC fund and maybe after you have private equity fund, and you have capital available. We are providing such capital, but I think that's the easy piece. The difficult piece that would provide much more benefits to society, I believe, is helping farmers make this transition. And I'm sharing that with you. I have no clue if we can really make it in the time frame that we have to meet, because it's urgent. I believe it's a mix of different type of stakeholders involved. It's collective, it's public, private, it's corporate in the food and ag value chain, also financial players that have a lot of money. And I don't know, I wish we could find together the new standard for, well, make regenerative agriculture the new normal, so that it's investable just like renewable energy. But it's not the case yet. So we need to have the proper de-risking scheme to make that investable and financeable, if I may say like that. But for the moment, it's not really the case. That's why we're struggling a bit.
Thank you, Alicia. Actually, what you said now is bringing me to the last question to the panel. If you, I don't know, are you feeling positive, or are you feeling optimistic? Are you feeling pessimistic about the future? What do you think? And if you could, like justify with one thing that is, making you thinking positive or thinking negative about the future, about scaling up the regenerative agriculture, I would love to hear this. Let's see if we've managed to finish on a positive note or or another one. It's a question to all of you.
Okay, I will start. Maybe I'm very positive, but now it is the beginning. Yes, we are in the first step now. But I'm very positive that we can change something, and we can show show the whole impact of the whole agriculture on the environment, and maybe add quality of the food that we produce and everything. But maybe the last sentence from my point of view, not for farmers, but for banks and other institutions, financial institutions, don't be afraid to invest in some kind of solutions that are not existing, that are existing now on the market, and give some outcomes and KPIs to show some proofs, yes? Because there are some solutions now, yes? And maybe invest in those kind of solutions to quickly show the outcomes, KPIs, and maybe to scale it more effective.
Thank you, Adam. George?
Yes, I'm also optimistic. Generally not, but on this I'm quite optimistic. And I think the conversation that we've had is in a way reflects this, because we know what is the direction of travel, so we agree on this. I mean, it's now legal, it's law in the EU. We also have some instruments. I spoke about a couple today. So we have some instruments, at least in terms of the regulatory framework. So it's there. And we also know that we need to start working a bit more forcefully on the business case, on creating the necessary incentives. So we have also started this work as part of our regulatory framework. I hear from my colleagues in the panel that they are also started to think about this. And we need to get together and see who does what and when, and what is necessary, the next steps. So this is also happening. And I finish with the fact that just a few weeks ago, we've had the results of the so-called strategic dialogue for the future of agriculture in the EU, where we had a very long process, and we started from quite different parts. But those people that sat together, that discussed together where we should go and how we should sort of build our common vision, managed to agree on something. And I think this is very, very important. So we now also have a blueprint, we have a plan. So I'm quite optimistic.
Great.
I'm also optimistic, so I don't know, we haven't agreed anything, but seriously speaking, the parallel Alice gave, it's very, let's say, I would say good one, because recall the times when renewable energy was sort of strange idea, make up somewhere in Brussels, how some skeptical people try to present it, and now you see it's under every roof, let's put it this way. So agricultural transformation, it has to be done. Let's say it's consensus about that we cannot continue this way. And regenerative agriculture is one of the drivers of this improvement, and it's also a no-brainer. So from that perspective, just matter of the development of this methodology, this science-based, let's say, track record of the researchers, researches, and then what I said about this joint, let's say, platform of KPIs. We have to going, in some extent, we have to also talking about the profitability, follow cash, and again, cash from subsidies, cash from off-taker, and also the same KPIs from from lenders, and it will fly. I would say just matter of scaling up, building the competences, also how to help in the field those people. Also in the field of corporates, also you see the demand for people who would like to who can continue this journey. So it also shows that just matter of gaining the right amount of resources.
Optimistic? Pessimistic?
No, I am, let's say, optimistic. Otherwise, I would not wake up in the morning or get up in the morning. But I think we are already late. But that's life. We are late on all topics around climate anyway. So let's say we're late. But there's an emergency to act because we can see that we are already in a deadlock situation, starting to be on a deadlock situation. Right? The farms that are highly conventional, we can see that the recent hazards are much more damage, provide much more damages to them than if they were on a more sustainable agriculture or regenerative agriculture. We can see pictures. You see one field and the other conventional regenerative, you can see the difference. One is completely flooded, it's mud, and the otherwise is with we can see it's still living. So we can see the evidence. So that's why it gives me hopes that people start to see. And the other thing that gives me a hope is that now my industry is only talking about biodiversity, but they have no clue where to put money in. And I said to them, come on, it's in front of you, your food, agriculture. It's just in front of you, take that. And they say, oh, maybe. So that's also providing hope for the next future.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Michał. Thank you, George. Thanks, Adam. Thanks to the audience. You did a great job for me. I don't need to summarize even the panel because you mentioned everything: collaboration, KPIs, evidence, data-driven transition, and so on. So let's make it happen. We have, let's say, we have the right momentum. We have, like all partners around the table. Let's build together something, and it's also a call to action. If you would like to get engaged, join us as EIT Food in building regenerative agricultural landscapes. Reach out as well to my speakers, and let's make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you to you as well, Eva, and to all the panelists for this very lively discussion. I don't know about you, but I always love when speakers start by stating that they agree with each other, then they proceed to radically disagree with each other, and then eventually they find a sort of understanding midway or in any point across the continuum. It was very interesting, and it's important that we keep talking about how to finance the ecological transition while being fair to the farmers and, of course, to all the actors of the value chain. And with this, please, let's thank again the excellent speakers of this panel, and also thank you from the audience for the very nice exchange and thought-provoking questions. With this panel, we actually wrap up the Net Zero Food System track of the next bite. It was a pleasure to be along you across this journey. I hope you had fun. You still have time to visit the Startup Lounge and to mingle around the venue. And at 4, we have our closing address from the plenary. Thank you very much. Goodbye and enjoy.